Notice I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. Occurs when there is a sec between characters. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. 12 Brides and a Strawberry Chapter 2 Karakura Town, Kurosaki House. A knock came at the door. Yuzu, her ears still ringing, got up off the couch and hurried to it. Opening it, she found Yuryu, Chad, Kigo, and Mizuro all standing in the doorway. Pushing his glasses up, Yuryu smiled at Ichigo's sister. Hello, Yuzu. Sorry for arriving so abruptly, but... Kigo scratched the back of his head. Considering we heard Ichigo's scream from all the way across town, we wanted to know if he was okay before the town suffered aftershocks. Chad looked up at the ceiling in the direction of his friend's room. Not only did Ichigo almost knock the earth off its axis with that scream, his spiritual pressure was erratic. He could practically feel the substitute's rage from just standing in the doorway. Yuzu let the others in and closed the door. I don't know what's going on. Dad was on the phone talking to someone and went up to Ichigo's room afterwards. Then suddenly Ichigo just starts screaming. Still on the couch, Karen looked over her shoulder and grimaced. Yeah, and judging from what I can still hear, the commotion hasn't stopped. Yuryu frowned. Do you know who was on the phone with your father? Dunno. I think Isshin may have called the guy Shunsui though. All four young men recognized that name, Kigo and Mizuro remembering the last time the head captain had decided to grace their presence. What does he want? Kigo asked angrily. While nothing happened to Ichigo, the clear and obvious threat Kyoraku insinuated made him not want to trust the strange Soul Reaper. I dunno. But whatever it was, it made Ichigo go nuclear. The group carefully made their way up the stairs, treating every step like they were walking through a hazardous minefield. The four tiptoed their way across the hall until they reached Ichigo's door, hearing a lot of commotion going on. You've done a lot of crazy shit, but now you've gone too far, roared an angry Ichigo from behind the door. Ichigo, just calm down. Everyone's already agreed, no. My answer is no. But Ichigo, I said no. Suddenly, the door swung open, and the group was met with a startling scene. In the middle of the room stood Ichigo, holding his father by the collar with one hand and his fist raised in anger. Isshin had clearly been through a rough time, his face showing signs of distress. In the corner hiding was Kon, looking absolutely terrified from seeing Ichigo rage like this. Please, Ichigo. Isshin put his hands up. Why are you so upset? Are you gay? Is that what's the problem? Ichigo's frustration boiled over. Yuryu quickly fired an arrow in front of him to get his attention, his arrow flying out the window. Enough. One more punch like that, Ichigo, and you'll seriously hurt your father. While Ichigo's anger didn't evaporate, it did lessen upon seeing his friend standing in the doorway. Yuryu. What are you guys doing here? Ichigo, Yuryu picked his words carefully. Whatever Isshin had been on the phone with the head captain about had made Ichigo completely snap, and he did not want to have to subdue Ichigo by force. We came because your spiritual pressure is raging out of control. And the scream we heard that's got everyone reaching for the earplugs, Mizuro added. Chad stepped forward and faced Ichigo, putting a hand on his friend's shoulder. You need to calm down. Tell us what happened, and we can try to help. Chad, the tall Mexican's expression turned serious. Ichigo. Drop him. Now. Not wanting to start a fight, Ichigo reluctantly let go of his father. Isshin hit the ground with a hard thud. Ow. Taking a deep breath, Ichigo turned around and sat on the edge of his bed. Guys, I'm beyond angry because of the deal that BSTRD made with head captain Kyoraku and Kisuke. What deal? Kigo asked with a scowl. Ichigo turned his attention to Yuryu and Chad. You remember that weird incident that the Soul Reapers were involved in while we were gone? Where that crazy guy tried to replace the Soul King with some kid? What was his name? Tokunada. Tokunada Tsuneyashiro, answered Yuryu. Yeah. You know how the head captain managed to get a truce with Nell, Jinjo, and the Sternritters? I don't know who any of those people are, but I'm guessing it's important, Mizuro noted, taking a seat in a chair while Kigo sat on the table. Well, head captain Kyoraku and Kisuke decided the best way to keep the peace would be to have an arranged marriage. All four young men knew exactly where this was going. And my dad offered me up as the groom. What? Kigo gaped while the other three gasped in surprise. Mr. Kurosaki, it's the 21st century. You can't just do that. Yuryu frowned. So Kyoraku wants you to marry an Arankar? Is it Nell? Or Miss Halibel? Chad asked. Ichigo's expression turned angry again. Oh, it's way worse than that. They want me to be the lucky groom to 12 wives. 3 Soul Reapers, 3 Arankars, 3 Sternritter, Tatsuki, Riruka, and Orihime. This time all 4 of Ichigo's friends stood there with gaping mouths. Yuryu didn't even bother trying to adjust his glasses. Did I hear that right? Your father arranged a marriage between you and 12 women. Kigo, ever the idiot, slid off the desk and started to bow at Ichigo's feet. Ichigo. You're a god. A god. Having decided that now was the best time to come out, Kon slipped out from behind cover and angrily pointed a fluffy paw at Ichigo. Hey! What gives? How come he gets literally all the chicks? He gets my sweet Orihime and that Soul Reaper with the huge jugs. Ranjaku is going to be a bride too? Chad raised an eyebrow at the idea of Ichigo getting hitched, let alone with Ranjaku. A god. Kigo was the next person to feel the wrath of Ichigo's foot, the angry teen silencing him with a stomp. Yeah, Dad said that it's Riruka, Orihime, Tatsuki, Yoruchi, Ranjaku, Mashiro, Nell, Halibel, one of the girls I saved back in Hueco Mundo, and 3 of the Sternritters I fought. Regaining his senses, Yuryu leaned back against the wall. Why that many though? Isshin weakly raised a hand. Kyoraku and Yoruchi asked if anyone wanted to marry Ichigo as a symbolic show of unity. All 12 women came forward. Ichigo's gonna need a bigger bed, Mizuro noted with a chuckle. I'm not doing it. I'm not marrying anyone. Kon just continued to point at Ichigo angrily. Seriously? You've 12 babes offering themselves on a platter, and you say no? What are you, gay? Ichigo's frustration boiled over again. No. I'm not gay, guys. But I'm not going to marry someone because this prick and Kisuke made some agreement without telling me. I mean, Ichigo stretched out his arms and gestured to the room they were in. 12 wives. Where the hell could they stay? My closet was barely big enough for Rukia. How could I possibly support them? I work a part-time job for crying out loud. Ikumi ain't gonna bump up my pay if I tell her, hey, I got hitched to 12 women, think you could give me a 500% pay raise? She'd either laugh or kick me out. Probably both, Mizuro lamented. I'm certain that the Soul Society would have figured something out or they wouldn't have gone through with this. I doubt it. Taking another deep breath, Ichigo shook his head. I can't do this. Not even for the sake of the Soul Society. Someone else is going to have to take one for the team. Yuryu gave his friend a skeptical look. He had a feeling there was another reason Ichigo was saying no to this bizarre marriage but just wouldn't bring himself to say it in front of so many people. So are you saying you're okay if someone else marries Orihime and Tatsuki? Huh? What are you talking about? Think about it. Sure, they probably said yes to the idea of marrying you specifically, but it's possible it doesn't matter whom the groom is as far as the Soul Society is concerned. They want to make a symbolic show of unity no matter what. Now that our friends have already agreed to it, it's unlikely Head Captain Kyoraku and the 13 court guard squads are going to let them back out. If not you, I'm certain that Kyoraku will find someone else willing to marry them like Byakuya. Yuryu was only being partially honest. He highly doubted that everyone involved would be okay with marrying anyone who wasn't Ichigo, especially Orihime and Tatsuki. And while the likes of Halibel and the Sternritter might be okay with marrying someone else such as Byakuya, the fact that so many women were willing to slip on a wedding ring for Ichigo showed just how many lives the substitute has touched over the years. Yuryu would have even gone so far as to call Ichigo an alpha if he weren't so dense half the time. But he figured the argument would at least put a crack in Ichigo's obstinance. The thought of Orihime marrying Byakuya of all people rankled Ichigo fierce, and his angry expression returned. Like hell I'd allow that. I crashed an execution. I can easily crash a wedding. Chad was glad Yuryu was able to get Ichigo to think differently on the matter, although he had doubts about what the Quincy had said. So what are you going to do now, Ichigo? Staring down at his hands, Ichigo felt like he was being pulled in two separate directions. On the one hand, he didn't want to go through with this just because his dad signed him up, and on the other hand, he didn't want to risk Kyoraku marrying off his friends to people he didn't want, or to risk the fragile peace that had settled between everyone. I don't know, he confessed, hanging his head. I'm too sad to think straight. Mizuru walked over to Kigo and helped him up while Chad picked up Isshin, slinging the barely conscious man over his shoulder. We're going to be downstairs in your dad's clinic. We'll try to talk to you some more once you've calmed down, Chad said, picking up Kon while he was at it. Yuryu was the last to leave, giving Ichigo a deep, inquisitive look. I don't like this either, Ichigo, he started to say when they were both alone. But perhaps you should give it some more thought considering how many women are agreeing to be your betrothed. Yuryu, what is it you really want to ask? Pushing up his glasses, Yuryu decided to just ask the obvious question. Do you prefer men? Out! Ichigo screamed, his rage returning. I'm sick of all of you questioning my sexuality. Get out. Now. Yuryu got out of the room with a burst of Harenkyaku before he was the next one to face Ichigo's wrath. Letting out a sigh, Ichigo fell back onto the bed. He felt tired and exhausted. The last hour alone felt more draining than any battle he'd fought. For several minutes, a weariness washed over him and he felt sleep start to take him. But his impending slumber was impeded when he heard soft footsteps approach his bedroom. He sat up and wiped his tired eyes. Yuzu. That you? The door opened and it wasn't Yuzu coming in. Hi, Ichigo, cheered a very merry Orihime. In her hands was a box of freshly baked bread. Did you hear the news? We're going to be married. Part of Ichigo had assumed that Orihime had been coerced into this against her will by Kyoraku or one of the others. To hear her so cheerful told him that she had been only eager to share Ichigo with 11 other women. Orihime, he started, feeling awkward considering what they were supposed to be now. What are you doing here? Oh, I wanted to come by to talk to you. Yoruchi's got all the girls at Kisuke's to have a round table with them to discuss how our marriage is going to work. I baked some bread for the occasion and wanted to share it with you. She opened the box and saw several loaves of freshly made bread. The smell of Orihime's cooking filled the room and it helped alleviate Ichigo's anger. But the gnawing in Ichigo's heart told him that he had to put his foot down on this. He couldn't just go through with this because it was expected of him. Not this time. Orihime. The sad look on Ichigo's face told the teen girl all she needed to know. Her happy smile fell from her face and she set the box of bread down and sat down next to him. You don't want to get married? Turning to face her, Ichigo tried as hard as he could to put his feelings into words without trampling all over Orihime's heart. Orihime, that I feel the same way about you as you do for me, he confessed. Putting a hand on the girl's shoulder, Ichigo looked deep into his friend's hazel eyes. Nothing would make me happier than to marry you, Orihime. I mean that. But this. He gestured to the direction of Urahara's shop where the scheming shopkeeper was. This isn't fair to us. If we are going to be married, it should be because we love each other. Not because our friends decided it behind our backs. While Orihime was delighted to know that Ichigo felt the same way about her as she did him, it still hurt to hear him reject the marriage proposal when they were all okay with it. Are you sure? I swear to you, Ichigo, that I won't let this marriage be a prison for you. None of us will. I'm sorry, Orihime. But my mind's made up. It killed Ichigo to see the sad look on Orihime's face, but she understood Ichigo's position. Okay then. I'll just leave this here. She pushed the bread away and stood up. I think you should go and talk to everybody at Kyoraku's. They might not believe me if I tell them. Excuse me. Turning away, the dejected Orihime walked out of the room. Feeling like a bstrd, Ichigo looked over at the box of bread and frowned, having second thoughts about rejecting the marriage proposal after hearing Orihime talk. Sighing, he put his shoes on and headed out the door. As he walked down the stairs, he could hear his sisters treating their father for the aftermath of the earlier incident, Kigo and Kon laying on a table next to him. Karen gave him a peculiar glance as he walked past her, having seen Orihime's sad face as she left the house. Hey sis. Yeah, Ichigo. Have another bed made. A surge of anger returned to him, and he balled his fists. Kyoraku's about to join my dad. Meanwhile, Seoul Society, Mayuri's lab. Mayuri sat at his desk, typing out keys as he watched the incubator attached to a device next to the computer begin growing the next Nemuri. What a pity Nemuri Nanago had to be reconstructed like this. I would have been very eager to see if she was capable of reproducing offspring. The child of someone of her nature and Ichigo Kurosaki's would have been most interesting to dissect. The mad scientist heard someone approach him from behind and turned around in his chair, giving the intruder a scathing glare. And just what do you want? 15 minutes later. Urahara shop. Ichigo stormed into the shop, ready to confront the shady shopkeeper. Where is he? Tessai stood dutifully at the register, Jinta and Yururu putting up candy nearby. The boss is in his workshop. He is busy with one of your brides, Ichigo. What are you talking about? Doing what? Bringing her back to life. You wouldn't want to marry a corpse. Would you? Bambietta Basterbine was felled in battle against Sajin Kamamura, and her comrade with the Z-script brought her back to life as a zombie. Kyoraku is undoing the zombification and bringing her back to life. Ichigo was confused by the news. What do you mean, bringing her back to life? He can do that. Well, Mayuri was able to do something similar to Arrancars and Sternritters. It was decided that Kyoraku would be the one to revive her since his methods have more pleasant results. But your brides are all in the living room talking. They all arrived a few minutes ago, so they're probably getting started. Kyoraku gave the Arrancars Gigace to stay in. They're not my brides, Tessai. I'm not going through with this. Jinta balked, having seen several of Ichigo's would-be brides. Are you serious? All those hotties just lined up to marry you, and you're gonna turn that down? What are you? Ichigo's raised fist in anger silenced him. I dare you to finish that sentence, he growled. But fine, that I'll go talk to them. Walking past the frightened Jinta, Ichigo headed down the hallway. Passing by the door to Kyoraku's workshop, he saw a note on the door addressed specifically to him. Dear Ichigo. I already predicted your reaction to the news of your little engagement and took the precaution of fortifying my lab to prevent you from busting down my door. It would not be a good idea to disrupt me in the middle of my work unless you are interested in a very messy situation. I trust you would not risk leveling half the town to try to strangle one poor candy shop owner who was only looking out for your best interests. Kyoraku. P.S. Congratulations on your engagement. I'm so happy for you. I am going to stuff that hat down his throat, seethed a frustrated Ichigo. Putting an ear to the door, he heard all sorts of strange sounds. Listening to Kyoraku revive Bambietta, he heard what sounded like a blowtorch igniting, then a saw cutting a log, then a jackhammer, and then finally, moo. Did I just hear a cow? Shaking his head, he turned away from the door and saw the door to the living room cracked open. Before he opened it and rained on everyone's parade, something compelled him to stop for a moment and listen to what everyone had to say. Kisuke took the liberty of setting up a large round table for all of Ichigo's brides to gather around. Halibel, Nell, and Sung-sun were in the gigace provided by Kisuke and dressed in regular human clothes. Yoruichi sat at the head of the table in her usual orange jacket and black breathes while Ranjaku and Mashiro sat opposite her in their gigace. Ichigo noticed how the human and Quincy group were missing a member each. Orihime had not yet arrived, and Bambietta was still in the process of being revived by Kisuke. He did notice the litany of scars on Candice and Menenius and wondered what had happened to his two former enemies after he'd fought them. The last thing he took note of was the black bracelets that all but Tatsuki were wearing before realizing that they were all wearing power-suppressing bands. Alright then. I was hoping that Orihime would show up, but she's probably still talking things over with Ichigo. So then, let's get started. Yoruichi sat down in a chair and addressed everyone. Before we go through with this massive marriage to Ichigo, we need to lay down some ground rules and figure out some logistical matters. Halibel, wearing a black t-shirt and jeans, was the first to speak. I presume we're not going to live in that small house of his. I do not wish to share the fate of Rukia Kachiki and get crammed into his closet. Tatsuki and Ruruka couldn't help but give deadpan expressions. Seriously? Ichigo did that, said Tatsuki. Even I wouldn't be that cruel, and I stuffed her into a doll. Ruruka added, much to everyone's confusion. All Ichigo could do was cringe and continue listening. Kisuke and I thought of that. She turned to the Quincy and Arankars. Are any of you aware of when we fought the bounce? Menenius answered, vaguely. They were a race created during a freak accident that tried to exact revenge on the Soul Society for their slaughter. Sounds familiar, Candice added with a look of impatience. Yes. Before he launched his attack, the leader of the bounce, Jean Korea, had his base of operations at a large manor located on the outskirts of town. It's the perfect place that's big enough for us all to live in. Kisuke and Tessai have already started renovating it. Everyone gets their own personal room, and Ichigo gets a room big enough for all of us. The idea of living in a mansion made Menenius's eyes light up. That's perfect. I can finally leave that dingy house we've been crammed in since that freak let me and Candy go. Question. Tatsuki leaned forward and gave the woman who convinced her to do this a stern glare. How exactly is this all going to work? Are we having one large wedding or 12 separate ones? Halibel spoke faster than Yoruichi could, gesturing to her two companions. Ours can be all together. Is that going to be a problem with you, Neliel? Wearing a red hoodie and black breathes, the greenette shook her head. That's not a problem for me. Although I'm going to need to have Orihime fix the crack in my mask so I don't revert to my child state at the worst possible moment. Tatsuki could only raise an eyebrow at that statement. Okay, I feel that there's a lot y'all are going to have to get me up to speed on when this is over. Yoruichi turned back to Halibel. I presume you won't be present very often considering you are the ruler of Hueco Mundo. I won't be around all the time. But I will be by as often as I can. Sung-sun and Nell will remain here whenever I am absent. That's fine with me. As for you two. Yoruichi looked over at the two lieutenants. Is Kensei and Toshiro alright with this? Kensei said he was fine with it since he's got Shuhei to do most of the legwork. He says I can stay over here to attend to Ichibari unless I'm needed over at the Soul Society in case of an emergency. I've talked it at length with my captain as well, Lady Yoruichi. I can balance being Ichigo's wife and being the lieutenant of Squad 10. Very well. I'll leave things to you two to keep things under wraps with the Soul Society. Since I'm no longer a captain and no longer the head of my clan, my brother has given me his and the clan's blessing to marry Ichigo since he's done so much for us. Turning back to the Quincy's and Arankars, Yoruichi addressed the next item on her agenda. Now then. This next part is non-negotiable. I am well aware that, with the exception of Tatsuki, everyone at this table has been enemies with each other at some point in the past. But as long as we're all with Ichigo, that means no more fighting. She held up her bracelet that all but one of them shared. Unless it's an emergency, these stay on. Ichigo doesn't need us getting into an argument and causing chaos. That's all right with me, Menina said, looking over at the Arankar women. But you're definitely going to want to keep a collar on Bambi. She's not exactly the most stable of people. Yeah, we heard about that. Kisuke's already got a Seki rock collar around her while he finishes bringing her back. Until we're sure she can be trusted, it stays on. Now then. Yoruichi turned to the two humans, her eyes focusing on Tatsuki. Since you're the only one of the three with a family, we decided to keep your wedding a secret. When you feel the time is right, you can tell your parents at least a version of the truth that they can believe. Fair enough. I'm only doing this for Ichigo and Orihime's sake. Not the Soul Society's. But I will say this, Orihime gets married first. She looked at the others with eyes that refused to bargain. Everyone else can wait their turn. Got it? Tatsuki and Halibel stared each other down for a tense moment before the blonde gave a small smile. Oh, I like you. The talk was interrupted when Candice slammed her fist down onto the table. All right already. We already agreed to this proposal of yours. When can you have Orihime Inoue heal us? The stern Ritter pointed at the scars on her face. I am not going to my wedding looking like this. Yeah, those scars and stitches are not cute at all, Riruka couldn't help but add. Yoruichi raised a hand, gesturing for the lime greenette to calm down. Don't worry. I've already talked it over with Orihime and Kisuke. We'll get you two fixed up as soon as your friend is brought back. By the way, I've been meaning to ask something. The werewolf pet her head to the side as she looked at the Quincy's. Is Bambietta aware enough in her present state to understand what was going on? Not really. Gigi has been giving her small amounts of blood to keep her in a dazed state, but at this point her mind's shot. I imagine Kisuke Urahara will tell her why she's being brought back once she's revived. That doesn't sound horrible at all, sarcastically said Tatsuki, Ichigo thinking it as well. Anyway, we'll go over dresses and rings tomorrow. And yeah, Tatsuki, I agree that Orihime has the right to be Ichigo's first wife. Ah. The side door opened and the Orangette walked into the room. Speak of the devil. How'd it go with Ichigo? Orihime's despondent face told it all. Yoruichi sat back and sighed. I take it Ichigo didn't take the news well. Taking a seat next to Tatsuki and Riruka, Orihime shook her head. No, he doesn't want to get married. He said that She hung her head. He says it isn't fair for him to get married because he has to. Yoruichi could only facepalm. That boy. As stubborn as ever. Mashiro frowned. So that means no marriage. Does he not like any of us? Still listening, Ichigo flinched. Candice was fuming. The hell do you mean he doesn't want to get married? He's got 11 amazing women who all stepped up to the altar. What is he, gay? Why does everyone keep asking that? Ichigo thought bitterly. Wait, so if there's no marriage, then that means Bambi doesn't need to be revived anymore. She can go back to being Gigi's zombie, noted Meninus. Ichigo's gut churned. He knew of what happened to Toshiro and Ranjaku when they were defeated and fell under the Z Sternritter's control. That wasn't a fate he'd want anyone to suffer through, enemy or not. Damn it. No marriage means that Minnie and I aren't going to be fixed. Damn it. I want to look at the mirror without cringing. Sure, the Sternritter gestured to her and her partner. Minnie and I are in this for personal reasons, but we don't have a problem with Ichigo Kurosaki being our husband. But you guys all agreed for more than just the alliance truce. Huh? Seeing the downtrodden faces on Ranjaku, Mashiro, Riruka, Nell and Orihime all made the emotional knife in Ichigo's heart drive itself deeper. And the pain only grew as they kept talking. But, Ichigo means so much to us. Nell started, looking down at the table. Holding a stuffed bunny in her lap, Riruka let out a deep sigh. We all owe Ichigo so much for all he's done for us. Why can't he let us make him happy? Yoruchi shook her head, feeling a little dejected herself. I don't see what the problem is. All of us care so much about him. Why can't he see that? I know. Orihime hung her head, hating that she had to be the one to break the bad news. Unable to bear it anymore, Ichigo opened the door. Hey, he said, shocking everyone with his sudden disappearance. Seeing Ichigo walk into the room, Yoruchi raised an eyebrow. I was wondering how long it'd take you to come in. You were standing there forever. Wait, how long did you know I was there? Since we first heard you thunder into the shop, Halibel said, having sensed Ichigo earlier with her pesquisa. Taking a seat in the unoccupied chair, Ichigo looked down at his hands for a moment before looking back up at everyone. Is what you all said the truth? Every word, Ichigo. Nell gave her friend a tender smile. Most of us owe you a debt, Ichigo. Without you we'd be dead or worse. Becoming your wives would be a small step towards paying back that debt. You guys. You don't have to feel like you owe me Ichigo. The young man was cut off when Ranjaku, who'd mostly stayed silent the whole conversation, spoke up. No, we don't have to do anything, Ichigo. But we want to. Do you think all of us would raise our hand in marriage if it was Byakuya or Kenpachi? Because I know I wouldn't. I know none of them would. When Ichigo fell silent, Ranjaku continued, You've touched all our lives, Ichigo. Let us be with you and make you happy. Hearing the words come out of Ranjaku rocked Ichigo to his core and he realized that all 11 women were serious about being his wife. He took a deep breath before collecting his thoughts. Okay. If you're all serious about this, then I'll marry you all. Really? Gasped a happy Nell and Orihime, making everyone next to them look at them funny. But how is this even supposed to work? Yoruchi brought everyone's attention back to her. We'll parse out the fine print tomorrow. In the meantime, why don't we all get some rest and crash. The door to the living room was kicked down, making everyone jump. There, standing in the broken doorway in tattered clothing was Bambietta Basterbine, very alive and very upset. A collar was wrapped around her neck to suppress her powers, but the fierce look in her eyes said that might not even be a factor when conflict was involved. You. Bambietta's eyes were burning with rage as she pointed a finger at Candice and Meninas. You killed me. You beaches. Actually it was Gigi that killed you. We just watched, said Meninas matter-of-factly. Tatsuki nudged Yoruchi's arm. There's a lot you guys need to get me up to speed on. First you kill me, then you have Gigi turn me into a zombie and I get beaten up, then I wake up to find out I'm alive and you sold me into a marriage to some soul reaper just so you can move out of the safe house. And get our bodies fixed too. Orihime scratched the back of her head. Should we leave? I get the feeling this is about to get intense. Halibel merely sat back in her chair, her hand ready to slip off the power-dampening bracelet in case the agitated Sternritter tried to fight everyone. After all the Vandenrake has put me through, this is entertaining. You shut up. Bambietta shouted. You want me to marry Ichigo Kurosaki? I don't even know what he looks like. Candice merely pet a thumb to the man sitting next to her. Well, here you go. Here's your fiancé, Bambi. Try not to blow his chances on your wedding night. Before you cause any trouble, I'd recommend a shower, Sung-sun noted, wearing a white dress while fanning her face and wrinkling her nose. You literally smell like a corpse. Please, like I'd ever marry someone like. Her eyes turned over to Ichigo. Because the two had never come face to face, this was the first time Bambietta had ever actually seen Ichigo Kurosaki. When she took in how handsome her new husband was, hearts shot out of her eyes. Holy cow, he's a hottie. Ruruka merely looked at the ragged girl funny. So that's what it's like from the other side. Later that night. Ichigo's room feeling even more tired than before, Ichigo sat down on his bed once more. After Candy and Minnie had dragged Bambietta away to go get her cleaned up and in clothes that didn't smell unpleasant, the group had decided to end their meeting for the night and come back later to talk things over more now that all parties had agreed on the marriage. The door opened and Ichigo felt his heart warm a little to see Orihime walk back into the room. Oh hey, Orihime. What's up? I just came by to see how you're doing. Your dad's downstairs explaining everything to your sisters. Did you beat him up? I was not happy when he set this up without telling me. He grabbed the box of bread that the Orangette had originally brought with her. It's no longer warm, but you want to eat this with me? Smiling happily, Orihime sat down next to him and grabbed a piece of bread. The now betrothed Orangeheads ate in silence for a moment while they let the weight of their situation sink in. So that we're getting married? Ichigo awkwardly asked after he finished his bread. Orihime waited until she finished eating to respond. Taking the box and setting it to the side, the Orangette turned to Ichigo and nervously took hold of his hands. Ichigo, I know this is bizarre. For both of us. This isn't what either of us wanted. She knew what Ichigo wanted to say earlier and decided to lay it all on the table. I don't know about Nell, Ranjaku, or Ruruka. And I can't speak for Tatsuki. But I want you to know something, Ichigo. She leaned forward until Ichigo could see his reflection in her soft, hazel eyes. Holding his hands against her chest, Orihime gave the warmest smile she could give him. I want you to know that no matter what, you'll always have a wife that genuinely loves you unconditionally. Smiling back at Orihime's heartfelt confession, Ichigo took his hands from hers and wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. Thanks, Orihime. I love you too. Slowly he leaned in until their lips met. The kiss was soft yet sweeter than candy. All the rage and exhaustion Ichigo had felt over the past few hours melted away as he and Orihime shared their first kiss. The kiss ended and the two smiled at each other. Orihime, can you stay with me for just a little longer? We might not get a chance to be alone very often anymore. I'd love to. Ichigo sat back against the wall. Orihime lay right beside him with her head on his shoulder. The two hugged while enjoying each other's company, falling asleep together in each other's arms. Meanwhile, outside watching the couple were several of Ichigo's future brides. Ah! They look so cute together. I should have brought a camera, said Ranjaku with a smile. Yeah. We should leave those two alone for now. Like he said, he's probably not going to have much private time soon. Yoruchi stood up and turned to their third companion. Anything on your mind, Halibel? The Queen of Hueco Mundo watched the romantic scene with a look akin to jealousy. Nothing. It's just that I can see why he fought so hard back in Hueco Mundo. She turned to Yoruchi. Why don't we arrange some dates with him so we can get some one-on-one time with him before we all tie the knot? Yoruchi gave her new friend a smile. I think I like the sound of that. To be continued. Oh, make a wardrobe for Bambi. No, no, no. Bambietta shouted, tossing the pieces of clothing offered to her by Kisuke and Tessai away. The Sternritter wore a robe around her after throwing away her tattered Sternritter uniform. None of your clothes suit me at all. Now that she was alive, she needed new clothes to wear but refused all clothes offered to her. Well, you need to wear something, Miss Basterbine. All of the clothing shops are closed and it's getting late. Good grief, Kisuke rolled his eyes as Bambietta tossed another shirt at her head. And I thought it was impossible to pick out something for Jinta. The door opened and Ruruka walked in with a chest of clothes. Here. If it'll get you to stop making such a racket, here are some old clothes you can wear until you can go shopping. Please, what fashion sense can a girl like oh? Bambietta's eyes lit up when she pulled out a dress covered in hearts. I think I like this. Huh, guess those two have more in common than we thought, Kisuke noted as the two girls discussed more cute outfits for her to wear. Chapter 3 The next day. Karakura town still exhausted after yesterday's whirlwind of events, Ichigo decided to take a long walk to try and clear his head while the morning sun started to rise. He and Orihime had woken up at the break of dawn, both not realizing they'd fallen asleep in each other's arms. After an awkward greeting, Orihime decided to head back to her apartment to check on Ruruka to see how she was doing. Isshin was still in the clinic, a massive ice bag covering his face as he slept on. This is going to be hell to explain to Yuzu and Karen, he noted as he stepped outside. He'd long since stopped trying to hide his dual role as a substitute Soul Reaper from his twin sisters, but he had a feeling they were going to flip when they found out their big brother got engaged to 12 women. It's even going to be worse if Ikumi finds out. Part of him still wanted to reject this whole matter. He had no idea how this was ever going to work, living in a large manor with 12 wives. Kigo is going to want a party. I just know it. He shuddered about what Ranjaku, Tatsuki, Riruka and the Sternritters would do to him if he suggested that. Or Kon. His walk took him to the park. Ichigo figured the green scenery would help lighten the mood. As he walked and breathed in the crisp morning air, he came upon a bench that lay on the side of the path. To his surprise, one of his brides was sitting there also enjoying the morning sunshine. Oh! Sun. Wearing a long-sleeved black shirt and jeans, the slim Arankar looked to the left and smiled when she saw her fiancé walking towards her. Oh, why hello there, Ichigo. I see you're an early riser too. Hey, Sun. Is it just you out here? Yes. Neliel is always late to rise and Mstr Halibel had to return to Hueco Mundo after the meeting but she will return soon. Here, Sun patted the empty spot on the bench. Why don't you come and join me? Nodding, Ichigo sat down on the bench next to her. The engaged couple settled into a comfortable silence as they took in the morning sunlight and enjoyed the chirping of the birds overhead. This is nice. Sun said before she unexpectedly leaned to the side and laid her head on his shoulder, sighing in contentment while she let his warmth ward off the damp morning chill. Ichigo went rigid upon feeling Sun's head on his shoulder, freezing up as she slipped her hand into his but relaxed upon deciding that since they were going to get married, it wouldn't hurt to share some intimacy with her. She's a lot more forward than she appears, he noted before relaxing. So did I guess this is the first time we've ever actually gotten the chance to speak to each other. Indeed. I'd actually seen you twice before yesterday. Mstr Halibel, me and my two sisters watched your battle with Grimmjow from the distance. You were well. Sun remembered watching Ichigo battle the number 6 Espada. She'd felt fear from the terrifying holification that Ichigo had mstred. You made quite the impression. Silence returned. For a moment while Sun continued to lean against her future husband and lace their fingers together. Finally Ichigo decided to ask what had been on his mind since he first saw her in the park. Hey, Sun. If it's alright to ask, why did you agree to marry me? For a few seconds, Sun said nothing as she gathered her thoughts. She'd expected the question to come eventually and decided that honesty was the best policy. Well, I would be lying if I said I have such a strong emotional attachment to you like Neliel did. But in truth, I'm not doing this for political purposes like Mstr Halibel. Sun paused and in the light of the morning sun Ichigo noticed the pink blush on her cheeks. What is it? It's just that when you saved me from that vile Quincy, that when I watched you fight to protect me and my sisters after we were defeated. Sun felt her heart beat faster as she remembered Ichigo fighting so gallantly against Quilge. Would you believe me if I said I was smitten by you that day? You were a soul reaper. But you came to Hueco Mundo at the behest of Neliel to help her kidnapped friend. And even when you didn't need to, you came to our aid because you wanted to save us. I've thought of you a lot since that day. And I'd be lying if my thoughts weren't romantic ones, she confessed, laying her head back down on his shoulder and smiling. I know I'm not Orihime in Oe. And I know it's too soon to ask you to love me like you love her. But I'd like to love you all the same until then. Ichigo didn't know what to say, his heart beating fast from the confession. The soft look in her eyes told him she was being serious. Okay, he finally said, giving her hand a squeeze while pressing his head gently against hers as they watched the morning scenery. By the way, what happened to those other two friends of yours? Apache and Mila Rose? They're back in Hueco Mundo. They'll be taking care of things alongside Rudborn whenever Mstr Halibel isn't there. Why? She took her head off his shoulders and gave him a knowing look. Were you hoping for all of us to be your wives? What? No. Ichigo put his hands up defensively, his reaction adorable to Sung-sun, who chuckled from his face. Don't worry, Ichigo. I offered myself since out of the three of us, I'm the only one capable of being a decent housewife. Trust me, you don't want Apache to be in charge of the cooking. So then. Sung-sun slid across the bench and embraced her fiancé with her slim arms. Yoruchi told me about a love hotel nearby. Shall we go and get to know each other better, she asked teasingly, her face so very close to Ichigo's. Having a woman he barely knew who was engaged to him and sending all the signals made Ichigo's brain freeze for a moment from so much blood rushing to his head. Giggling, Sung-sun pulled away. It's perfectly fine. I'm just teasing. Tatsuki did tell us you were a bit shy towards women. But don't worry. Her purple eyes glinted with playful intent. Mstr Halibel and I will teach you every little thing you need to know about women to get over your shyness. Ichigo's ears were burning. Thankfully the spell Sung-sun had put over him broke when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he saw that he'd received a message from Yoruchi, asking him to come to Kisuk's shop. That I gotta go. Sung-sun nodded. I'll see you around then. Mstr Halibel and I are going clothes shopping when she gets back. Leaning forward, she kissed him on the cheek, making her fiancé blush again. I'll see you later, dear. The errand car turned around and walked away, Ichigo watching her leave for a few seconds before turning around and heading for Kisuk's. Reaching the store, Ichigo headed inside. He said hello to Tessai and the kids as he passed them before reaching Kisuk's living room. Sitting at the table was Kisuk, Yoruchi along with head captain Kyoraku and Nanao. The shopkeeper, his right eye still blackened by Yoruchi's punch, smiled warmly at the substitute as he walked into the room. Oh hey. There's the lucky groom. Wham. Kisuk was sent flying backwards by Ichigo's punch and landing on his back, Ichigo dotting his other eye. Kyoraku bristled from the sight of Ichigo's fury, nervously looking over at his lieutenant. No. I need a keto barrier. Please. You brought this upon yourself, head captain, scolded Nanao. Ouch. That's harsh, Nanao. Grumbling, Ichigo sat down next to Yoruchi, the blush on his face returning as his Soul Reaper bride scooted closer to him and smiled. What do you guys need me for? Don't tell me you want to marry me off to more women. Well, I can only imagine Lisa's reaction when she finds out she was left out of the arrangement, Kyoraku said to himself before turning to Yoruchi. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. He felt the weight of her head on his chest as she snuggled with him, the soft scent of her perfume lulling the tired boy into the arms of slumber. To be continued. Make field testing Urahara shop bang. 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 Hiyori's nerve twitched. Working for Ikumi's odd jobs, She'd been hired by Kisuke to deliver some materials to the shop for him, but Tessai had insisted she waited in the storefront while Kisuke ran a few tests. Okay, that banging is driving me crazy. What the hell is that weirdo doing this time? Storming past Tessai and the kids, the short wizard kicked the door open to Kisuke's workshop. Okay, Kisuke, what the hell are you doing making such an awful racket? She blinked in confusion when she saw what was going on. Huh? Ah. Hello, Hiyori. Kisuke turned around to see his old lieutenant, holding a clipboard in his hands. Don't mind the girls. They're just doing field testing. Field testing? The room was littered with smashed wood and torn linens. On two newly constructed beds were Mashiro and Meninas, the two ladies bouncing up and down on a mannequin that was pinned underneath them on their respective beds. Hiyori was further confused when she saw Mashiro's mask was on and the Quincy's thighs looking beefy, like she could crush a concrete block between them. The hell are they doing humping those dummies? Oh, I'm trying to build Ichigo a bed that can withstand a lot of lovemaking. With Mashiro's holification and Meninas's script abilities, they're going to need a bed that won't break on them. I also need to have Yoruchi run a few test beds when she gets back in case she decides to get adventurous with her Shunko to crash. One of the legs on Mashiro's bed finally broke and the bed shattered to pieces after a few more bounces. Kisuke scribbled some notes on his clipboard. Okay. Needs more reinforcement on the legs. Hiyori blushed at all the implications. Suddenly she felt a little sorry for what was coming to Ichigo. Is Ichigo going to be okay? Oh Hiyori, it's Ichigo we're talking about. He'll be fine. Crash. The two jumped and Meninas's bed was the next to break. Maybe. Chapter 4. A few days later. Karakura High School rooftop. The bell had rung and school had let out. Wanting to have a moment alone, the substitute Soul Reaper headed up to the rooftop, leaning against the railing as he looked out at the town below, his thoughts heavy with the upcoming nuptials. Kisuke, Yoruchi, and Shunsui were busy finalizing the preparations for the weddings. In the meantime, that left Ichigo to wait nervously as the day he got hitched to 12 women drew closer. He'd already had to beat up Kon multiple times when the mod soul offered to take Ichigo's place, Ichigo shoving him in a doll dress and hurling him into Yuzu's room as a punishment. Footsteps loudly came up to him from behind. Turning around, he saw Tatsuki approaching him. Oh. Hey, Tatsuki. The dark-haired girl stood next to Ichigo as they settled into an awkward silence. Finally, Tatsuki spoke up and broke the ice. Yuryu is making our wedding dresses, she told him. Really? Yeah. Kisuke tapped him for the job since he's good at sewing. We had him at Kisuke's place yesterday so he could take our measurements. Wait, is he only going to make dresses for the three of you or Tatsuki smiled in amusement. Yeah, he only meant to make the dresses for me and Orihime. Unfortunately, he got roped into making dresses for all 12 of us. She couldn't help but chuckle. Oh dear. Meanwhile, Ishida Mansion Ryukin walked down the hallway and noticed his son's door opened slightly. Curious, the Quincy opened it and was baffled by the sight before him. Yuryu, what in the world is all this? He demanded to know. The former A Sternritter sat in the middle of his room, surrounded by boxes spilling with white linen. Multiple pages of dress designs littered the floor. The young Quincy groaned while in the middle of sewing Orihime's dress, looking up at his father with tired eyes. I guess it's true what they say, no good deed goes unpunished. Originally, Yuryu only wanted to make Orihime and Tatsuki's dress since they were his friends. But Riruka had barged her way into the fitting and browbeat Yuryu into making a dress for her since she no longer had access to Yukio's money in order to buy a fancy dress. In no time the other 9 women came in and, being impressed by Yuryu's design of Orihime's dress, asked him to make their dresses as well. Being all alone with 12 volatile women, even the stoic, steadfast Yuryu had no choice but to agree to make their dresses. Ryukin pushed his glasses up and shook his head. While he and Yuryu constantly butted heads, even he had to feel pity for the boy for what he'd gotten himself into. Back with Ichigo and Tatsuki. So, are you ready to get married to us? Tatsuki asked. Ichigo could only run a hand through his hair and sigh. Who the heck would be ready for something like this? Are you ready? Ha! Of course not. The two friends laughed, their anxiety fading away for a brief moment. Ichigo's thoughts turned to the first girl he was going to be saying "I do" to. So, I've been thinking. Careful. You know how dangerous that is, Tatsuki teased. Before I marry Orihime, I want to have at least one solid date with her, he confessed. So what's stopping you? The boy shrugged. I just don't know what to do for a date. Maybe something like take her to a movie or something. You could always take her to a fancy place to eat — oh get real, you two. Ichigo and Tatsuki almost jumped out of their skins at the sudden interruption. Whirling around, they saw Ruruka Dokugamine standing behind them. Ruruka? What are you doing here? Ping her head with her hands on her hips, the foolbringer huffed. I came to get my uniform. I'm going to be starting class with you guys next week. Wait, you're going to be going to school? Yeah. Ruruka's eyes turned to the side as she blushed awkwardly. It was still bizarre for her knowing she was going to be married to Ichigo soon. Yoruchi suggested it. I never really had much schooling after I ran away from home to join Jinju and Execution. She figured if I was going to be your wife, I'd need to finish an education. Shaking her head, the magenta-haired girl turned her focus back to the matter at hand. Don't do something so dull, Ichigo. Do something you know for certain Orihime will love doing. What is she good at? The two friends looked at each other while racking their brains on what they knew about the joyful Orangette. They knew she liked bizarre food combinations and had a very active imagination. Then Ichigo remembered her job. She works at a bakery. I know she loves to bake. Well, there you go. Do that, Ruruka said with a satisfied smile. An idea popped into Ichigo's head and he pulled out his cell phone, hitting a few numbers. He waited until a certain shopkeeper picked up on the other end of the line. Hey, Kisuke. Why hello there, Mr. Kurosaki. To what do I owe the pleasure of your call? Can you help me out with something? I wanted to have a date with Orihime and I thought Tatsuki and Ruruka listened to Ichigo as he spelled out his idea, both girls impressed by his creativity. Ruruka felt a little jealous at the effort Ichigo was showing Orihime but held her tongue for now. She was confident she'd have her moment when it came. Well, of course, chimed Kisuke after Ichigo finished explaining his idea. Sounds simple enough. I'll need a day or so to get everything set up, but I think I can swing that easily enough. A day? Tatsuki raised an eyebrow in skepticism. It's going to take more than a day to get all that done. Ah, I see Miss Arisawa is with you. Rest assured, my dear, that this humble shopkeeper is capable of getting the job done. Trust me. Kisuke is king when it comes to doing the impossible. Something like this is nothing to him, Ichigo told the girls. Oh ho. Praise from you, Mr. Kurosaki, is worth more than my weight in gold. I'll be sure to put extra effort into making sure your date with Miss Inoue goes well. Speaking of which, where is Orihime? Asked Ruruka. I passed her by on my way into the school, but I figured she'd be up here with you guys since she's off work for the next few days. Miss Dokugamine, I see you are also present. Yoruchi asked Miss Inoue to meet her after school so she and Halibel could take her shopping. Halibel's here. Ichigo had not seen much of the Arrancar queen, Sung-sun telling him the day before that she'd returned to Hueco Mundo. Why yes. She and Yoruchi have taken to each other quite well. Ranjaku came by to join them as well. Wait, what are they shopping for? Ichigo's two fiancés looked at each other knowingly before turning away to stifle their chuckles with their hands. Ichigo's innocence was so cute. Oh, you'll see. In the meantime, I'll get started on your request. Kisuke hung up and Ichigo pocketed the phone. You think Orihime will like this? Tatsuki gave her friend an approving smile. I think she'll love it. The next day. Ichigo, where are we going? And can I take this blndfld off now? Orihime asked as her friend guided her down the street, her hand in his firm grip as he led her down the street. Not yet. I don't want to ruin the surprise for our date. Orihime's heart beat fast. Ichigo had texted her last night to ask her out on a date, but when she asked what they were going to be doing, Ichigo had been rather cryptic. When they'd met up at her apartment that morning, he'd said that it was something they could only do today. He'd put a blndfld on her and led her away to the spot of their date. Here we are. Ichigo undid the blndfld. As soon as Orihime's hazel eyes opened, her expression lit up like a Christmas tree. Oh my goodness. Is this your own bakery? Said a smiling Ichigo. Kisuke had come through on Ichigo's request to set up a small bakery on an empty lot, the building's exterior looking cartoony. On the sign above the door read Orihime's Tasty Treats, with a cartoon picture of Orihime's head giving a thumbs up. For the bubbly teen, to have her own bakery was like a dream come true. You made a bakery just for me? Ichigo awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Yeah. It's only for today. Kisuke could only get a short permit for us and we can only do it for today, but I thought we could bake some stuff together and he stopped talking when he saw Orihime's expression. The orangette had stars in her eyes as she looked at the bakery, the happiest of smiles on her face. It's perfect. Oh, I've always wanted to bake together with you, Ichigo. Even if it's only for a day, it's the perfect way for us to have a date. Seeing the joy in Orihime's face made Ichigo's heart flutter. He was pleased by how Orihime was at the idea of having a literal pop-up bakery. Orihime showed her appreciation with a tight hug and kiss on the lips. Taking Ichigo by the hand, Orihime headed straight for the front door to her new bakery. Come on. Let's get to baking. A few hours later. The two stood awkwardly at the counter in the empty shop. They'd spent a few hours baking happily together, but to Orihime's dismay, there weren't many customers who came into the pop-up bakery. Some of their classmates had stopped by to buy some treats, but customers were sparse. While Ichigo was more than happy to spend quality time with his fiancée, he felt guilty that their bakery wasn't doing better business. Orihime was putting on a happy face, but Ichigo could see the shadow of disappointment in her eyes from seeing so few people want her bread. Standing at the counter in the empty shop, Ichigo scratched the back of his head. Orihime. Yes, Ichigo. I'm sorry that the date didn't go any better. I was hoping a lot more people would come buy our stuff, he confessed. But Orihime simply shook her head. It's okay, Ichigo. Spending time with you is worth it. Besides, we'll have a lot to eat tonight when we leave, she said with a smile. Ichigo couldn't keep up a disappointed face when faced with Orihime's bubbly optimism. The two hugged each other tightly, lost in their own little happiness. Then they heard the bell on the front door ring. Breaking the hug, the pair saw a nervous man in a suit approach the counter. Hi, the man awkwardly greeted. I'd like some bread please. Sure. While Ichigo was a little weirded out by the man's anxious expression, his eyes flickering to the side windows, Orihime happily handed him a freshly baked loaf and rang him up at the counter. Ichigo was going to point out the man's weird behavior when another man entered the bakery with a nervous expression, followed by a woman who looked equally anxious. I'd like some bread please, they both said in anxious unison. What is with these people? Ichigo couldn't help but wonder as Orihime sent him into the back to pull out some more bread. Meanwhile. Looks like business is picking up. Yoruchi sat on a rooftop and watched more people enter the pop-up bakery Kisuke had set up for the young couple. Guess all they needed was a little advertising, said an amused Halibel, standing next to her with her arms crossed. Ever since the woman had entered her engagement with Ichigo, the errand car had met with Yoruchi during their preparations for their upcoming wedding, and the two started to enjoy each other's company. Yoruchi looked down the street. Well, I'm not sure if Ichigo would approve of the girl's form of advertising, she said with a smirk. Halibel shrugged. Regardless, at least it gives the others something to do. Although I think the Quincy's are getting too into it. Upon learning that Ichigo's date with Orihime was not going so well, the other brides decided to lend a helping hand. To that end, Tatsuki, Candice, Mashiro, Riruka, and Bambietta were all encouraging people to go to the bakery, while Ranjiku and Sungsun flirted with every man that walked by, promising to spend a little quality time with them if they'd buy some of their friends' bread. The men would rush towards the shop to buy, but upon leaving would find that the girls had disappeared, the girls dashing away with flash step/sonido as soon as the men's backs were turned. Once a line started to form outside the shop, Yoruchi stood up. I think we can tell the girls to back off. Orihime and Ichigo are going to run out of bread at this rate. Very well. I'll signal them to stop. Halibel turned away and walked with Yoruchi. By the way, you slept next to Ichigo, correct? Yeah. Why? Does he snore? No. Thank goodness. I refuse to marry someone who snores. Later that night. Orihime's apartment. The apartment the Orangeette lived in was dark as the girl and her betrothed entered. In Ichigo's hand was a bag with 2 small loaves of bread, the last that the pair had after selling all of they'd baked. As soon as they'd ran out of bread and closed up shop, the bakery that Kisuke had set up literally collapsed in on itself, its walls folding again and again until only a small box the size of Ichigo's torso remained. Kisuke arrived to congratulate them on their success before taking the pop-up bakery away with him. Orihime was counting all the money they'd made after Ichigo turned on the light. Are you sure you don't want any of the money? Ichigo gave her a reassuring smile. Keep it. You're the one who did most of the baking. All I did was pull stuff out of the oven when you told me. Putting down the money, Orihime simply responded back with a smile of her own. No. It meant the world to me that we could bake together. You know, Ichigo, you could make a good baker yourself. Heh, it'd be a better job than working for Ikumi, that's for sure. Noting the emptiness of her apartment, Orihime found a note on the dinner table. Picking up, she read Riruka's handwriting. Orihime. Bambi and I are going to have a girls' night out with Tatsuki. Enjoy having the place all to yourself with Ichigo. Riruka. A warm tension started to build in Orihime's stomach, realizing she was all alone in her home with Ichigo. Thinking about their first kiss, Orihime remembered how they'd mentioned to each other it wouldn't be likely they would be able to spend much alone time after they got married. The tension in her gut grew and her hands started to slightly shake with anxiety. Ichigo. Would you like to stay here for the night? Since we're going to be married, we should get used to sleeping in the same bed. Spotting the nervous look in her eyes, Ichigo felt his own heart beat a little faster. Sure. But I don't have any pajamas. That's okay. You can just sleep in your boxers. I've seen you in swim trunks, so it's not like I haven't seen you with your shirt off, Orihime responded with a blush on her face. Here. I'll go get the bed ready. You can make yourself at home. Upon turning away, Orihime walked down the hallway. As soon as she reached her bedroom, she opened her closet and pulled out the items she'd bought with her friend's help yesterday. Ichigo waited for 15 minutes, sitting on the couch comfortably before deciding to go check on Orihime. Getting off the couch, he headed for the girl's bedroom and knocked on the door. Orihime. Come in, Ichigo. Opening the door, the substitute Soul Reaper stepped inside, only to stand in the doorway dumbstruck at the sight that was waiting for him, sitting on the edge of the large bed. Ranjiku and Yoruchi helped me pick this out. How do you like it? Orihime asked with a shy smile, the blush ever apparent on her pretty face. She crossed her legs and leaned back a little to let Ichigo get a better look at her. Ichigo was very much liking what he was seeing. Orihime sat on the bed wearing an appealing set of lingerie. Her light skin was hugged by the delicate fabric, accentuating her figure. Ichigo's mind raced as he took in the sight before him. Orihime. You look. He couldn't think of a word that could possibly describe the Orangette's beauty. Stunning. Radiant. Orihime couldn't help but smile at Ichigo's reaction. I was going to wait until our wedding night, but I thought about it and I want to do this now, when I have you all to myself. Taking a deep breath and steadying her shaky nerves, Orihime beckoned to her fiancé with a finger. All of the blood that had rushed to Ichigo's face upon seeing Orihime in such lovely attire went in the opposite direction, and he felt his heart racing. He wanted to ask if she was sure about this, but the look in her eyes was telling him she was very sure about this. Orihime's heart beat faster when Ichigo slowly removed his shirt, revealing his toned chest. She felt a rush of warmth as he sat down on the bed next to her. No sooner did she feel the warmth of his body touching her side, the Orangette leaned forward to start their NTMT moment with a kiss. As their lips connected, Ichigo's strong arms wrapped around her. Orihime raised a hand and pressed it against his chest, feeling the fast beat of his heart. The two continued kissing, lost in their own world. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. Sung-sun walked out of the shop and was confused when she saw her fellow fractions, Apache and Mila Rose, sitting behind a shoddily crafted stall selling something to several Arancars and Soul Reapers. What in the world are you two doing? She demanded. Apache grinned as she turned to Ichigo's bride. We're selling tickets to the big fight between MSTR Halibel and Ichigo. What's it look like? It looks like MSTR Halibel is going to be irate with the both of you. The duel between MSTR Halibel and Ichigo is supposed to be secret. Just between them. Why would you dash? The serpentine Arancar was cut off when a loud beeping started going off. The two Arancars behind the stall stared with jaws gaping when a dump truck started to back its way towards them. They both prepared to jump out of the way, but it stopped several feet from their stall. The door to the back of the dump truck opened up and the trailer started to raise. Sung-sun watched in utter bafflement when her sisters became enveloped in an avalanche of money. The door to the dump truck's cab opened up and Yashiro Shihoin stepped out. Give me a ticket that's front row. I wanna see Ichigo Kurosaki get his butt kicked. Evidently Yoruchi's little brother had not completely gotten over her sister's future husband being married to 11 other women. Apache and Mila Rose's heads poked out of the massive pile of money and they greedily started to count the seemingly endless pile of bills. Sung-sun could do nothing but shake her head and walk away. Those two are so shameful. And they wonder why I'm more wife material than they are. Chapter 7. Garganta. Ichigo awkwardly followed Halibel through the dark void of the Garganta, his face still flushed and embarrassed from falling face first into her. He walked on the flat pathway that she made with her spirit energy, her precise control over her power reminding him of when he followed Captain Unohana back to Karakura town. The silence was deafening to the hapless substitute Soul Reaper. He had no idea what was going on in his future bride's head with her back to him as they walked. Finally, Ichigo couldn't take the quiet any longer and scratched the back of his head while clearing his throat. So, this is the first time we have met one-on-one. Indeed, said the taciturn Espada, her footsteps echoing throughout the black void. Sorry about before. Halibel merely turned her head to the side and gave him a playful look behind her hollow mask fragment. I know that you just got through with Neliel, but perhaps you could wait an hour before you tried to get in my breathes? The blush on Ichigo's flushed face intensified from his bride's words. You know that me and Nell. The sentence was left hanging since the boy didn't want to spell it out. Continuing to walk down her lighted path, Halibel merely kept her back to Ichigo. You stink of Nell's scent. An Arrancar's senses are quite sharper than a normal human's, after all. I see. Ichigo made a mental note to take a shower every time he did it with one of his brides from now on. So. You want me to fight you? Ichigo almost bumped into Halibel when she stopped suddenly. Turning around, Halibel stared at her betrothed. The substitute couldn't help but sweat it out a little from the intensity in her emerald eyes. I will not marry the weak. I may have agreed to a treaty with the Soul Society, but I do not believe your head captain considered his proposal from my end. I am being asked to share a home with those I called enemy, with those who kept me chained and delighted in my torture. And to top it off, I, as well as someone I consider a close confidant and my subordinate, am being asked to share a bed with a Soul Reaper who's not even a man yet. When Ichigo opened his mouth to answer, Halibel silenced him with a finger to his lips. I will not marry a weak man. I will not marry someone who defeated his enemies by dumb luck. Yes, as Sung-sun told you, I witnessed your battle with Grimmjow and was impressed. But that was then and this is now. I want you to show me your strength. If you're going to be the king of Hueco Mundo, you are going to prove it. Wait a minute. King. What are you? Halibel rolled her eyes. Are you dense? What do you call a man who marries a queen? When you marry me, the queen of Hueco Mundo, that'll make you king. But. She turned away and resumed walking. You don't have to worry about any duties as king. Just as this marriage is a simple show of unity, your kingship will just be a title. You can leave everything to me. Ichigo remained silent, wondering just what life was going to be like as Halibel's husband. She certainly didn't strike him as a woman who would allow goofy antics like his mother had put up with Isshin. Sung-sun talked about her a lot when she and Ichigo were on the park bench talking. The demure Arrancar always spoke of her MSTR with the utmost reverence. But Ichigo should have asked Nell more about the woman to get her opinion as well. I guess I'm going to have to find out the hard way about what kind of a person she is. Their trip through the Garganta came to an end, the void opening in front of Halibel. Ichigo followed her out of the temporal maw and looked around, finding himself in a large room filled with white furniture. Despite the sterile colors, the room felt quite cozy. This is your room. Or, I suppose when you're here in Hueco Mundo, it'll be our room. Halibel leaned back against the back of a white couch and gestured to the large king-sized four-poster bed draped with black curtains. I know that you're probably tired after your little date with Nellio. I'm still getting everything ready for our battle. You should take this time to get some rest. I'll have some food brought up in a minute for you. I don't know what mental preparations you do before battle, but I suggest you prepare yourself. And you'd better get out of your human body. Don't worry, nobody will harm it if it's in here. Wait a minute. Where exactly are we supposed to be fighting? Halibel gave an exasperated sigh, her shoulders slumping slightly. I must apologize, Ichigo. It had been my intention to keep a private matter between us. I had meant to take you out into the desert outside of Las Noches and have our battle away from prying eyes. However, Halibel's eyes narrowed with irritation. My mistake was letting your other brides aware of my intentions. Nellio, Yoruchi, and Ranjiku insisted on watching. Then Ranjiku blabbed to her Soul Reaper pals and Nell told Grimmjow, who blabbed to everyone here. Now everyone wants to watch us fight. So, I've been forced to change things and have our fight in the arena that we built during the reconstruction of Las Noches. Your brides get a front row seat. So Orihime and the others are going to be here too? Crossing her arms, Halibel continued. For obvious reasons, your 3 Quincy brides are barred from ever entering Hueco Mundo again for the rest of their miserable lives. If they'd showed up, every Arrancar would be clamoring for their heads. Considering that the whole point of this marriage was to be a show of peace and unity, that would be the last thing either of us would want. Tatsuki also insisted on coming along too. Her expression softened and Ichigo saw amusement in the Espada's eyes. I must say, for a human with no powers, she's got spunk. She could see that Ichigo was concerned about Tatsuki coming to a world of hollows without any way to defend herself, so she put his mind at ease. I've already ordered the Arancars here to not so much as harm a hair on her head. Besides, she will have Orihime and Nell there for protection. Wait a minute, how many people are supposed to show up? An hour later. Standing in the middle of the huge arena that was jammed-packed with Arancars and Soul Reapers, Ichigo got his answer. And once again, I'm going to punch my dad silly for dragging me into this, he murmured to himself as he looked around. The arena looked like half the size of Las Noches and it looked bigger on the inside. Ichigo saw most of his brides sitting in their own personal box at the front row of the stands. Behind them were the captains and lieutenants. He noted Yashiro sitting next to Soifon, both of whom were looking at Ichigo with sadistic smiles. Quite the crowd we've drawn, said Halibel, walking up from behind Ichigo as the gates to the arena floor slammed shut behind them. The Queen of Hueco Mundo walked several paces away from him. Her hand reached behind her for the huge short sword on her back. Ichigo had to raise an eyebrow as she hooked her finger around the ring on the hilt to draw it. That seemed the most extra way to draw a blade. The brides watched in their special box, everyone nervous with trepidation at what was about to happen. Tatsuki sat between Orihime and Nell, nervously looking around at all the Arancars. The memory of previous encounters with powerful foes was a dark one that often haunted her nightmares afterwards. Do we really have to do this here? She murmured to Orihime. Sung-sun overheard the human and reached across Orihime to put a hand on her knee to get her attention, giving her a reassuring smile. Don't worry. Nobody would dare defy Mstr Halibel's order that none of you are to be harmed. And if one of them wanted to, they'd have to get past us. Although. She turned her head to look at the box above them. I think we should be more worried about Grimmjow jumping in. The rest of the brides looked up to see the blue-haired Arankar glaring down at the pair on the arena floor, sitting by himself since none of the other Soul Reapers or Arankars wanted to sit next to him. Is he going to be a problem? Asked a worried Ranjaku. Don't worry. If he tries to jump in, I'll handle him, reassured Nell, giving her former comrade a glare. The brides turned back to the arena floor. Ichigo pulled out his Zangetsu longsword, taking up a stance while Halibel did the same. The substitute and the Arankar locked eyes with each other as they waited for the other to make the first move. All was quiet in the arena as everyone waited tentatively for the action to start. Sitting in the box reserved for the other captains, Toshiro silently wondered if Ichigo was prepared for this. Sure, he'd beaten Yawatch, but that was only with help from Yuryu and Eisen. The captain knew from personal experience that the blonde woman Ichigo had to fight was a force to be reckoned with. For a brief moment, the silence in the arena became deafening. The intensity in Halibel's eyes Ichigo had seen earlier came back as she stared at him. Halibel gripped her short sword with both hands as she steadied herself. Everyone held their breath as they waited. The tension erupted when Halibel made the first move. Toshiro bristled in his seat as the center of her short sword started to thrum as it filled with yellow energy. Here I come, said the Arankar before she went on the attack. When Halibel moved, the arena lit up as the battle began. Halibel surged forward as quick as lightning, swinging her sword with the full intention of striking the substitute. Ichigo almost didn't bring his sword up in time, not realizing just how serious his bride-to-be was. He brought his Zangetsu longsword up to block her chop, but the blow sent shockwaves throughout his body. Her offense not stopping, Halibel continued to attack the substitute with a flurry of energy-fueled strikes. Despite his experience and training, Ichigo found himself on the back foot, being pushed back by Halibel's blows. Seeing an opening, Ichigo ducked to avoid a horizontal chop and took a swing at his bride. The blonde woman somersaulted backwards before holding out her hand, a yellow cirro forming in her palm. Tatsuki covered her mouth to suppress her scream when she watched Halibel blast Ichigo, his figure disappearing in the yellow blast. Orihime put a hand on her shoulder and gave her a reassuring smile before pointing at Ichigo, who remained where he was after using his sword to block the blast. Ichigo countered with a vertical chop of his own. Halibel blocked the strike and the two found themselves in a blade lock. "You're not going to use your short sword?" Halibel asked in an irksome tone. "I heard you faced those Quincy girls with both blades." Her eyebrows narrowed with irritation. "Don't find me worthy of going all out, do you?" She gave Ichigo no time to answer. Her sword burned with more yellow energy before Ichigo found himself being pushed back. Up in the stands the captains were all shaking their heads when they saw Ichigo get sent flying by another energy-powered slash. Just when everyone thought that Ichigo wasn't going to put up a proper fight against his betrothed, the boy finally reached for his sash and pulled out his shorter Zangetsu, finally dual-wielding his Zanpakutos. Gritting his teeth, Ichigo charged at Halibel and went on the attack. Everyone on the Soul Reaper side of the stand started to cheer for Ichigo as he began his counterattack, forcing Halibel to jump up into the air to dodge his dual strikes. Ichigo swung his smaller sword to form a line of energy. Getsuga Tensho. The line transformed into a burst of energy, one powerful enough to force Halibel to counter it with her Zero. But even that wasn't quite enough, the blowback from the explosion knocking her up into open air of the arena. She recovered her footing, only for Ichigo to flash step above her, bringing both blades down on her. Halibel blocked but the impact sent her cratering towards the ground. Sung-sun and the other two members of the Trace Bestia all gasped in horror as their MSTR landed on the ground. To their relief Halibel simply got back up, shrugging off the blow and dusting herself off. "Not bad. But why didn't you just use your Bankai yet?" "Because I don't want to seriously hurt you," replied Ichigo as he flash-stepped back down to the ground. However, when he saw the look Halibel was giving him from behind her mask, he knew he'd just said the wrong thing. The captains, the brides, and Grimmjow could all sense what was about to happen next. Halibel reached for the zipper to her top, revealing her form to the man. All of the small-breasted women in the audience stared at her with instant jealousy. "So, you still don't want to take me seriously? Is that it?" Anger flashed in Halibel's eyes. The short sword in her hand pointed downward, making Toshiro bristle once again. "Hunt, Tiburon." A cascade of water surrounded her, blasting Ichigo with a deluge as it expanded outward. When Halibel was revealed, he was shocked by her transformation. He didn't know about her released state and thought her form would resemble something like Grimmjow's. He had not expected her clad in white fishbone garments, her mouth uncovered while holding a big white sword. The espada glowed yellow. Too late did Ichigo realize he'd poked the shark. Her spiritual pressure was immense, eclipsing that of the Sternritters he'd fought during the war with the Quincy's. Getsuga dash, one swing of Halibel's blade was all it took to send a shockwave over at Ichigo, sending him flying. Once again, he found himself on the back foot as Halibel charged at him again. Regaining his footing, he started to clash his blades with Halibel, everyone bracing themselves from the shockwaves of their blows. Ichigo jumped to the side to avoid the massive sword, only to be met by a swift kick from Halibel's boot. His brides gasped in horror when they watched their future husband get knocked into a wall. Ichigo gritted his teeth to suppress a groan before gasping upon seeing Halibel aiming another Zero at him. Zero Oscurus. The black Zero was mercilessly fired. The captains all looked on in horror, all of them begging for Ichigo to take her seriously. Ichigo pulled himself away from the wall and made dual slashes with his swords. Getsuga Jujisho. His cross-shaped slash met Halibel's powerful Zero. The two blasts cancelled each other out, causing a cloud of smoke and dust to obscure the arena. Ichigo braced himself for a counterattack, but as the dust settled, Halibel was no longer in front of him. "You're strong, Ichigo. No weakling could have blocked a black Zero like that. But your concern for my well-being is more hurtful than your attacks." The voice came from high above Ichigo. He looked up and gasped to see Halibel standing in the sky above the arena, a colossal amount of water surging around her. Toshiro gasped upon seeing Halibel's move. She could conjure even greater amounts of water than before. So, just because I was only the number 3 Espada, because I was cut down by Eisen and was taken down by Yawatch, you think you need to go easy on me? Or are you simply overconfident you don't feel the need to take me seriously since you defeated Eisen and Yawatch? Well, here's what I say to that, you cocky bstrd, Cascada. In the stands with the other captains, Kyoraku cursed. Well, the boys stepped into it now. Nanao. His lieutenant was already ahead of him. Nanao jumped out of her chair and brought her hands up. Murmuring her chant as fast as she could, the girl brought up a barrier to protect the people in the arena stands. Grimmjow growled at the thought of being protected but merely stayed where he was, looking disdainfully at Ichigo as he disappeared in the rush of water. The surge hit Nanao's barrier hard, forcing Toshiro to get up and use Hyarinmaru to create an ice wall behind it to buffer the barrier. To everyone's relief, Ichigo remained mostly unharmed by the blast of water, though he was soaked to the bone. Dripping wet, he looked up at Halibel and saw the anger in her eyes and realized that the woman was right. He was insulting Halibel by not wanting to fight her seriously. Fine then. He held both of his swords up above his head. Whack. Halibel took advantage of Ichigo preparing to use his bankai and maneuvered behind him. With a single blow to the back of his head, Halibel knocked out the boy. Ichigo fell to the ground, his sword slipping out of his hands. That's that. The Arankars all jumped up and cheered from seeing Halibel win, while the captains could only facepalm upon seeing Ichigo laid low like that. The only exceptions were Soifon and Yashiro, both of whom were cheering upon seeing Ichigo get knocked out. Kenpachi was practically fuming with rage. What the hell? He lost so easily. When the hell did he lose his DMN spine? Ikaku and Yumachika had to hold him back from going down there. It's obvious that Ichigo wasn't taking this seriously, said Kensei, also shaking his head in disapproval. He wouldn't have lost if he'd gone all out from the beginning. And he should have known someone could catch him off guard while concentrating on his bankai. That was still interesting to watch. Guess we know who's wearing the hakama in that marriage, sneered Shinji. But we should seriously check and see if he's okay. Down at the arena floor, Halibel stabbed her blade into the ground and let out a deep sigh. The match was far closer than she'd expected. Had she allowed Ichigo to power up with his bankai, the result would have been far different. Still, at least he's strong enough whenever I want to spar. Sung-sun. She shouted up to her subordinate. Come take Ichigo to his dash. Her head jerked to the side and she glared. Grimmjow. What the hell are you doing? The number 6 Espada was gleefully kicking Ichigo while he was down. Looking up, Grimmjow merely grinned at Halibel. Getting what I'm owed. Son of a beach never gave me my rematch. So I'm getting me some payback, he said before going back to kicking Ichigo. Should we stop him? Tatsuki and Ruruka asked together, both of them concerned for Ichigo. Yoruchi shrugged. It's Ichigo. He'll be fine. Later. Enjin. A weary Ichigo opened his eyes. His memory was slow to recover as his vision cleared up. The events of that morning came to him, the breakfast date with Nell that escalated into being taken to Hueco Mundo by Halibel. His sides ached with pain but the softness on his back told him that he was lying on a bed. He groaned as he suddenly remembered the duel with Halibel, getting knocked out while activating Bankai. I'm going to get so much flack from Kenpachi and the others, aren't I? A new sensation started to make itself known. He could feel a warm heat around his loins. Blinking the fog out of his eyes, Ichigo sat up and looked around. The boy found himself back in his room that Halibel gave him. His soaking wet clothes were gone, leaving him lying on the huge king-sized bed. The next thing he noticed was Sung-sun lying on her belly between his legs. Sung-sun. What in the world are you doing? Her serpentine eyes looking up at Ichigo when she heard him wake up, Sung-sun took her mouth away and smiled. Oh good, you're awake. Why am I? I mean, why are you? Oh, I just felt you might like something to help you feel better after losing to Mstr Halibel. Sung-sun tilted her head playfully. You might have lost, but you still made a good show of it. And it's the job of a good wife to be attentive and supportive to her husband when he's having a bad day, after all, she said with a teasing smile. Without another word. She leaned in closer, showing her playful nature. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. Orihime's wedding is in about a week, which means we need to get the place ready. Opening the front door to the palatial mansion, the Arrancar gestured for Ichigo to follow her inside. Wow, I know we needed a big place since there's going to be 13 of us. But this might be too big, marveled Ichigo as he looked around the entrance hall of the manor, remembering his previous encounters there. It's a big place, that's for sure. We'll do our best to make sure it's kept clean. Nell led Ichigo down a hallway, coming to a crossroad of corridors. She pointed to the hallway right in front of them. Everyone picked their own rooms. Your Soul Reaper and human brides took that hallway. Her hand then pointed to the left hallway. My room, Sung-sun's room, and the room Halibel is going to be using when she's not in Hueco Mundo. Nell pointed to the last hallway on her right. Over there are the Quincy's rooms. So, everyone's grouped up. Ichigo wasn't sure how he felt about everyone getting into cliques. The whole point of this was supposed to be about unity. Then again, I suppose it would have been too difficult to have everyone sleeping in the same room. Yeah, we'd need a bed the size of the ballroom for that. A familiar voice came from behind Ichigo. Oh, you're back already. I'd have expected Halibel to keep you for at least a few more days. Hey, Yoruchi. Ichigo turned around and smiled at his Soul Reaper bride. No, I came back when Nell told me about the storm. I wanted to know that you guys were okay. From down the hallway, Ichigo could hear doors opening up. Oh, there you are, Ichigo. Ruruka and Orihime stepped out of their bedrooms. Down the hallway with the Quincy bedrooms, Menelaus and Bambietta stepped out to walk up to the others. Hey guys. Where's Tatsuki? Ichigo asked. She's at home with her family, Orihime explained, giving Ichigo a quick hug. She was glad that he was alright after the kicking he'd gotten from Kenpachi and Grimmjow. Ruruka crossed her arms and turned her head to the side, but Ichigo could still see the look of irritated jealousy on her face. Must be nice, having a family, she mumbled to herself. Seeing the concerned look in Ichigo's eyes, the Foolbringer blushed with embarrassment and simply shrugged. Anyway, we should probably do something before the storm gets worse. Is this place going to be alright? Ichigo looked around and imagined the typhoon tearing this place apart. It'll be alright. Kisuke helped renovate the mansion. Yoruchi knocked on an ornate door frame. Hell would freeze over before he made something that a measly storm could tear down. Her sensitive ears picked up the far-off sound of storm sirens blaring, and a flicker of doubt crept into her. Although then again, Kisuke isn't infallible. We should probably head to the bunker for now and wait out the storm. Bunker? Bambietta leaned against the wall and pointed down. Yeah, Kisuke and that big guy with the mustache were fixing up this place when they found a fully decked out bunker underneath it. Guess those bounce were really prepared, huh? Everyone's ears picked up the growing sound of storm sirens blaring in the distance. I guess we should head down and, Ichigo stopped when he noticed someone was missing from the group after doing a head count of his brides. Halibel and Sung-sun were still in Hueco Mundo while Mashiro and Ranjaku were in the Soul Society. Orihime said Tatsuki was sheltering with her family, but that left one person unaccounted for. Where's Candice? Everyone looked around, but there was no sign of the lime-greenette Stern Ritter. Actually, I haven't seen Candice since this morning. Orihime looked over at the other two Quincy brides. She told me earlier that she was going to get some air. I haven't seen her since. Do you think she's alright? Menelaus put a finger to her chin and looked up at the ceiling for a moment as she contemplated the question. I don't know. Candice hasn't been quite right since she agreed to this marriage deal. If Ichigo was expecting Bambietta to show any concern for her former friend, he was left sorely disappointed. Maybe that bimbo got blown away, she said coldly. Crossing her arms, Bambietta turned and walked towards the direction of the bunker's entrance. The thunderbolt getting taken out by a typhoon. If that isn't divine providence, I don't know what is. Bambietta's coldness irked Ichigo. It was understandable that the Eastern Ritter still didn't care much for her friend after what Candice and her other friends had done to her, but there didn't seem to be the slightest bit of concern in Bambietta's voice. Yoruichi raised an eyebrow as Ichigo headed for the door to the mansion. Where do you think you're going? You aren't planning on going out there, are you? Storms are just as dangerous in the Soul Society as they are here. You might be strong enough to beat Eisen and Yawatch, but you can't use a Getsuga Tensho on a typhoon, Ichigo. Yoruichi frowned at such recklessness. I'm going to go look for her. If it's not safe for me, it's not safe for her. Ichigo, wait, pleaded Raruka. You might be a soul reaper, but you could get blown away along with everyone else. Even you can't beat nature. It'll be all right. Everyone turned to Orihime, the only one in the room who was smiling at Ichigo as he strode off to find his bride. Ichigo is who he is. His heart is in the right place, and he can't say no to it. Turning around, Ichigo gave everyone a reassuring smile. It'll be fine. I'll be back before the storm gets too bad. Everyone just head down into the bunker and wait it out until I get back. Against the protests of his brides, save for Orihime who gave him a reassuring nod and smile, Ichigo pushed his substitute combat pass to his chest and popped out of his human shell again, Yoruichi catching his body as it fell. Striding to the door, Ichigo opened it. I'll be back. Watching Ichigo leave the manor, the brides all looked at each other worriedly. Ichigo was strong, but a force of nature wasn't something you could cut down with a bankai. Is he really going to be okay? And what about Candice? Who cares? Y'all coming or not? Shouted Bambietta from down the hall, pointing to a set of stairs that led down into the bunker. Yoruichi hefted Ichigo's body over her shoulder. Well, until he comes back, at least we can have some fun with his human body. All of the other girls turned and looked at her appallingly. What? Like you all haven't thought of it before. Meanwhile. Karakura town. Candice. Ichigo shouted at the top of his lungs while jumping between rooftops. The substitute had underestimated how fast the storm was moving. Already the winds whipped around him fiercely, and rain pelted him. Candice. Where are you? Realizing that trying to shout over the howling wind was getting him nowhere, Ichigo decided to try an old tactic he hadn't used in a long while. Closing his eyes, he summoned the Quincy's spirit ribbon, snatching a hold of it once he got a lock on Candice's spiritual pressure. In the Soul Society, it was impossible to use the trick because everyone was made of Raisher, but in the world of the living, it was easy. Following the trail of the spirit ribbon, Ichigo found the stern Ritter. The storm was getting worse, Ichigo having to fight against the wind and the rain while trying to reach her. Upon seeing her standing on top of a building, his eyes widened in horror. Oh my God! Is she going to jump? The need to protect Candice spurred him to push back against the wind, using his spiritual pressure to try and shield him from the worst of it. Candice, shouted the soaked substitute as he jumped onto the roof, hurrying over to the stern Ritter. Are you okay? Ichigo only barely heard the woman's voice through the storm around them. Peachy. I see you're back from Hueco Mundo. Candice, what are you doing out here? It's not safe, even for you. Menelaus said you haven't been yourself for a while. What's wrong? His first instinct was to put his hand on her shoulder in a show of support, but considering the volatile nature of the stern Ritter, that didn't seem like such a wise move. The roar of the wind was his answer. Candice refused to reply to her betrothed for a long couple of minutes, her white clothes completely soaked from the pounding rain. I don't know if I can do this, Ichigo. I just don't think I can be a wife. Ichigo stepped closer, concern filling his brown eyes as he stared at the buxom Quincy. What's wrong? I know Orihime hasn't healed your scars yet, but even if she couldn't do anything for you, I don't think less of you because of them. That's nice of you to say that, Ichigo. Really, it is. But the truth is. She looked to the side in the direction of the manor where the other brides were. I don't fit in with them. I can't be like those Arankars or that Foolbringer girl and be all buddy-buddy with people I was trying to kill not that long ago. Holding her arms, Candice scowled. I don't even fit in with Minnie or Bambi. We were only friends because we all became stern ridders around the same time. Bambi hates my guts. And even I can't blame her after standing by and watching Gigi kill her. Running a hand through her soaked hair, Candice looked back at Ichigo with sad eyes. I was never liked much back at the Vandenrake. My own people treated me with contempt. Why? Sighing, Candice turned back to the building's edge, swaying back and forth in the wind. Did Yuryu ever tell you about the Elstern Ritter? Pepe. The name sounded familiar, but it wasn't Yuryu who told Ichigo about him. I think Byakuya might have mentioned fighting a guy by that name after me, Orihime, and Chad left to head back to the royal palace. Turning back to Ichigo, Candice's face twisted with disgusted rage. Blue electricity sparked from her body as her thoughts turned to her vile comrade. Pepe was a disgusting freak, even among Quincy. His power was called the love. Her teeth clenched as the memories came back to her. I hated his guts. When Liltato told me she ate him, I practically did a victory dance. That BSTRD's power let him control people. Anyone hit by his power would fall in love with him. When you've been struck with his love beam, you would do anything he'd ask. And even before I became a stern ritter, Pepe just loved to use it on me whenever he got the chance. He didn't hesitate to use it more when I did get my script. The horror of what Candice was getting at chilled Ichigo more than the typhoon. He didn't. Yeah. He did. A lot. And Yawatch didn't put a stop to it. Ichigo knew that the Quincy King was evil, but he felt that Eisen had better standards when it came to what his subordinates did to each other. His Majesty had one absolute rule: there was to be no infighting amongst the stern ridders. It was an ironclad law that was punishable by death. Because I, willingly, did it with Pepe, he was beyond reproach. And if I killed him, Yawatch would have killed me in turn. That's that I can't even imagine. Just the thought of someone using such a power in that manner was vile to him. Candice looked down at her soaked stern ritter uniform. Yeah. Every time I came to my senses, all I wanted was to purge the stench of that BSTRD off me. So, I got with whoever was available to me and dressed myself like this so that I could attract anyone I wanted. So there it is. The greenette shrugged and let the rain hide her tears. I'm aware. Is that what you want for a wife, Ichigo? A slut? The hybrid and the Quincy stared at each other as the storm raged around them. It was taking all of Ichigo's spiritual pressure and Candice's blood venet to keep themselves from getting blown off the roof. Raising her hand, Candice let a bolt of blue lightning shoot into the sky. Her eyes filled with longing, Candice stared at the lightning in her hand. I agreed to marry you for entirely selfish reasons. But that's why I don't think I should be a bride, Ichigo. Not to someone as good-hearted as you. Turning back to Ichigo, the girl gave him a genuine smile, perhaps the first one she'd given in a long time. You deserve women like Orihime and Nell, a were like me doesn't deserve to be your wife. Ichigo stared at Candice for a long minute before pushing past the wind until he stood in front of her, his body shielding her from the typhoon's wind. I don't believe you. Huh? Anger flashed in the woman's green eyes. You think I'm lying about what that BSTRD did to me, she screamed over the wind. Not that. Ichigo took hold of Candice's hand. Sparks flew from her hand to his, but he paid it no mind. A selfish person would have kept quiet throughout all of it, only thinking about their own needs. You thought about my considerations and deep down you cared about what happened to Bambietta. I don't judge you for what you did in the past. Staring into her eyes, Ichigo gave her a smile that warmed her heart. I only care about the Candice that's right here, right now. I don't know how our marriage is going to go, but I will never, ever, call you aware. The sincerity of Ichigo's words, the way he was holding her hand, and the gentle kindness in his eyes caused the stern Ritter's heart to beat faster. Do you mean that, Ichigo? I do. I don't care about your past. I don't care about your scars. Heck, I don't even care that you tried to kill me. I will never think differently of you, promised Ichigo. Like a protagonist in a romance novel, Candice threw her arms around Ichigo and hugged him tightly, letting him hug her back. Thank you, she mumbled before feeling the storm getting worse. We should get somewhere safe. We're going to get blown halfway across Japan at this rate. Right. I'll get us home. Candice blushed when Ichigo picked her up and carried her bridal style off the roof, Flash stepping back to the mansion as quickly as he could. I thought you were supposed to wait until after we said, I do, before you carried me like this, teased Candice with a giggle. Think of it as a preview. So Candice, can I ask something? Shoot. Why is your power the thunderbolt? Looking back at her hand, Candice smiled. It's because I want to be free. You ever seen a lightning bolt, Ichigo? It goes wherever it wants, and nobody can contain it. It's free. She laid her head on Ichigo's shoulder, soaking up his warmth. Ever since I was a little girl, I loved watching storms. Watching a thunderbolt flash across the sky, I wanted to be just like that. Wild. Uncontrollable. Free. When she looked back up, she saw that Ichigo was smiling. That sounds appealing, Candice. Heh. Aren't you the charmer? And Yawacha's datin' on you said you were dense when it came to women. The forehead vein on Ichigo's head twitched. Now I'm really glad Yawacha's dead. So am I. Reaching the mansion after only a few more flash steps, Ichigo hurried to the door and opened it. The pair were just in time as the storm had reached its absolute zenith. Hope Kisuk did a good job in storm-proofing the place, said Ichigo while carrying his bride down the hallway. The power was out, causing Ichigo and Candice to wander in darkness. Candice held out a hand and created a small ball of electricity to help light the way. Looking around, Ichigo started to get frustrated when he realized that he had no clue where the storm bunker was. Damn it, where are we supposed to go? There you are. Ichigo spun around and saw Yoruchi angrily walking towards them. We've been worried sick about you, Ichigo. I thought you said you'd come back after a few minutes. She saw Candice in his arms and gave her a slight nod. Good to see you back, Candice. Orihime and Menenius were starting to get worried. She grabbed the sleeve of Ichigo's soaked shihakusho and pulled him down the hall. Come on. You two are soaked to the bone. We need to get you out of those clothes and warmed up before you get sick. Leading the pair down into the bunker in the basement, Yoruchi opened the door and led them inside. Wow. Korea didn't think small when he built this place, did he? Ichigo wondered when he looked around. Evidently, the Bounce were prepared for just about anything before they were ready to take on the Soul Society, the bunker fully stocked and had multiple cots lining the far wall. Seeing Ichigo and Candice, Orihime leapt out of the chair she was sitting in and rushed over. Ichigo. Are you two alright? Are you hurt? Her hands went to her hairpins, ready to use her powers if necessary. Giving her a reassuring smile, Ichigo set down Candice. We're fine, Orihime. Soaked but okay. Yoruchi opened a cabinet and pulled out a blanket and a change of clothes. You need to get back into your body, Ichigo. Candice, here. Your clothes are completely soaked through. We need to get you warm before you catch pneumonia. Getting back into his human body helped Ichigo warm up instantly. He made sure to keep his back turned while Candice was getting into the change of clothes before she sat down on his cot, wrapped in a green blanket. You okay? He asked her. I'm better. Pushing her soaking wet hair out of her face, Candice laid her head on his shoulder. Thanks for listening. Anytime. The others watched and smiled, albeit Bambietta, who turned away, as Ichigo took the blanket and wrapped it around the both of them, keeping the stern Ritter warm with his warmth. Worn out, both from fighting the storm and not having recovered from last night, Ichigo quickly fell asleep while sitting up. Candice felt sleep start to take her too but looked over at her fellow Quincy's. Hey guys. Yeah, replied Meninus, sitting on her own cot. When the storm's over. Let's move our rooms closer to Orihime and the others. We should all try to get along more than just keeping to ourselves. Both Quincy girls blinked in surprise. They never imagined Candice to be the one to suggest trying to get more friendly with the other women. You must have caught something in that storm. You've definitely gone delusional from the fever, scoffed Bambietta. Bambietta was surprised when Candice put her head on Ichigo's shoulder and sighed. We owe it to Ichigo. We should try to get along with everybody. He's doing his best to make it work. We should too. The E and P stern Ritters looked at each other with baffled expressions. Candice only agreed to marry Ichigo because of what benefited her. What happened out there to make her practically swoon for him? The answer wouldn't come. Candice quickly fell asleep next to Ichigo. Walking up to them, Yoruichi gently laid the two down on the cot so they could get more comfortable. Everyone smiled when they saw Candice snuggle with Ichigo while they were wrapped up, listening to them softly snoring while waiting for the storm to pass. To be continued. Oh make. Wait, what? Earlier, while Ichigo was looking for Candice. You think he's okay? Orihime asked while the brides waited in the storm bunker. Even down there, they could hear the howling of the wind that battered Karakura town. He's fine. I just hope something doesn't happen to him before I get the chance to sink my claws into him, Yoruichi said while stretched out on a cot. Me too. It's been a while since I had some relief. I can't believe we have to wait until we get married before we can be NTMT, said the E stern Ritter bluntly while leaning against the wall. Nell looked at everyone confused. Wait, we never said we had to wait to be NTMT with Ichigo. I did it yesterday with him on our date. The Flash Goddess and the stern Ritter's heads spun as they stared with wide eyes at the errand car. Wait, what? Shouted the both of them. You and Ichigo already? Asked Bambietta. They knew that Orihime had taken his virginity, which they were okay with since she was going to be his first wife. But they'd figured it was an unspoken rule to wait until they married before being NTMT. Yeah. And Halibel and Sung-sun had a moment with him last night after the match in Hueco Mundo, Nell said matter-of-factly. Yoruichi and Bambietta grew silent after a while before they both turned to each other, anger flashing across their faces. Oh, I am going to break his hips on our wedding night. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. 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 Taking enjoyment in each other's presence, the two continued to sit there for a while longer, just taking in the moment. Meanwhile, Ichigo's manner stepping out of her bedroom, Orihime ready to head over to Uriu's to see her finished wedding dress. She had no doubt that her good friend would deliver on something she'd be proud to wear for her big day. I should also check on Chizuru and the others and see if they'll want a girls' night before the wedding. Hey, Orihime. Startled, Orihime turned around to see Renji walking down the hallway towards her. Renji? Rukia left a few minutes ago. I think she went to go get lunch. It's alright. I'm not that hungry. Listen. The irritated look in his eyes told Orihime that the lieutenant was still angry about the situation. Can't you talk to Ichigo about this? I mean, marrying those Quincy's that it's wrong. I'm sorry but I am not budging on this issue. I'm not okay with my friend agreeing to marry 3 women who've tried to kill us all. Renji's temper once again got the better of him and his voice grew louder. Orihime, how the hell are you okay with this? You almost got killed by that monster, Yawatch. And you're okay with the man you love marrying 3 people who worked for him? They're the enemy. Renji was surprised when the Orangette failed to respond, merely narrowing her eyes at him in a manner that was quite uncharacteristic of her. After letting the silence following his tirade linger in the hallway for a minute, Orihime said 3 simple words. Ichigo's left shoulder. The sentence took Renji off guard. What? What does Ichigo's shoulder have to do with anything? On Ichigo's left shoulder, there's a deep scar. I asked him once where some of his scars came from. He said that the one on his shoulder came from you. From when you tried to kill him. That was different. Crossing her arms, Orihime simply glared at the lieutenant. Really? So, you trying to kill Ichigo back then and being friends with him now is different from Candice and Menenius trying to kill him back then and becoming friends with him now? Despite Orihime pointing out his blatant hypocrisy, the angry lieutenant stomped his foot in defiance. That was different. His scream echoed throughout the manor. His hand reached out to grab Orihime's arm. Am I the only one here that hasn't lost their mind? Hey! Let go of me. Before Renji could do anything else, 2 streaks of light whizzed by Renji's head, missing him by just inches. Turning to see what had almost hit him, the Soul Reaper saw it was 2 Quincy Heilig files. One was pink and looked like it was made out of hearts, the other was yellow and had what looked like a chain chomp at the tip. Let go of her. The next ones won't miss. Letting go of Orihime, Renji whirled around to see Liltado and Menenius standing at the end of the hallway. Both had their bows drawn and ready to fire more arrows at the Soul Reaper. What are you 2 doing here? We live here too, you dolt. Liltado spat out the lollipop in her mouth and drew back on her bow. Menenius was helping me move my stuff into my room. I was going to get acquainted with the kitchen when we heard you screaming like an idiot. I am so sick of all of you. You think you get to marry my friend and get to ride off into the sunset? Have an easy life. Renji was ready to pop out of his jigai and confront the 2 women. What rock have you been living under? Menenius gestured to the scars she still had from past experiences. We haven't exactly had it easy. You know what it's like to be dead. No, but why don't I ask Captain Hitsugaya? Maybe you 2 can compare notes, spat Renji. He reached into his pocket to pull out his Jikongai dispenser. Before he could take the pill though, a hand reached from out of nowhere and grabbed his ear. Yow! I'm gone for 20 minutes and you're acting like an even bigger jackass. The nerve on Rukia's forehead twitched while she twisted Renji's ear, a bag of takeout food in her free hand. You are going back to Urahara's. You can decide to be an adult like the rest of us and coat-check the attitude for tomorrow or you can go home. RGH. Fine. Slapping Rukia's hand off his ear, the lieutenant turned around and stormed out of the hallway, slamming the front door to the manor behind him. Sorry about that, you guys. Orihime, how's your arm? It's fine. I'm sure he just needs time to cool off. Returning their bows to their belt buckles, the 2 Quincy's walked closer to the girls. That fried chicken. I'm starving, Liltado said with her mouth watering from the smell. Yeah. Let's eat. Orihime looked around and noticed something. Hey, has anyone seen Halibel or Nell? I was hoping we'd go look at our dresses together. I'm pretty sure they're still in Hueco Mundo, Menenius said as they headed for the dining room. Liltado shrugged before sneaking a chicken leg out of the bag. Ah well. More chicken for us. Meanwhile. While Ichigo and Tatsuki were enjoying each other's company, Halibel was glad to see her betrothed be soothed before his big day. Sung-sun hid her smile from behind her sleeve. They make a cute couple. But Mstr Halibel, if you thought Ichigo was having problems, why didn't you go down there? It's important that we give him space to figure things out for himself. I saw Tatsuki nearby and figured she'd be able to speak more comfortably than you or I could. Still, we'll keep an eye on him and help him whenever we can. Halibel's subordinate nodded, looking down at her husband-to-be and felt a little jealous from seeing him with Tatsuki. But she understood the special relationship that she had with Ichigo and wouldn't begrudge her of that. Come on. Let's go check on our dresses. I'm interested in seeing what the Quincy has made. The two Arrancar turned and left the teens, both eager to see how tomorrow was going to play out. To be continued. Oh, make that tattoo later that night. Ichigo's manner. Hey, Yoruchi. Turning around, Yoruchi saw Ichigo come into her bedroom. Oh hey, Ichigo. Not going to have dinner? We got more chicken. Oh, I'm going to eat in a minute. I just wanted to ask you something while you were alone. So did I got to talking to a skin and he said something about you having a tattoo? He was quite vague about it. Yoruchi's cheeks blushed for a few seconds before she smiled. Of course he'd noticed that while we were in the middle of killing each other. Yeah, I've got a tattoo. Wait, I've seen you naked before. I don't recall you having a tattoo, Ichigo pointed out, remembering when Yoruchi first revealed her true identity as well as when they bathed together. That's easy. Kisuke mixed the ink with a special blend of his own so that it only shows when spirit energy is injected into it. Back when a skin had me on the ropes, I was on my hands and knees and the pervert gave me an antitoxin right on the tattoo which made it visible for a few minutes. Why? You wanna see it? Before Ichigo could give an answer, the werewolf turned around and revealed the tattoo to Ichigo. Leaning forward, Ichigo saw letters in bold print appear on the flash goddess's skin and read them aloud. God of Thunder. It was a joke that Kisuke came up with. Wait, why, God of Thunder? You're the Flash Goddess, aren't you? Well, that's my official nickname. Kisuke named me the God of Thunder because of something else. Really? Why? Grinning, Yoruchi explained the story behind the name. Meanwhile, the brides, Lil Tato, and a skin were all in the dining room eating their dinner when a strange noise started to fill the area. Orihime put a hand to her ear, confusion written all over her face. Is that thunder? The sound of thunderclaps grew and grew until the whole building shook. Everyone cried out in shock when Ichigo was sent flying into the room, landing on the table with a thud and causing everyone to jump up in alarm. Ichigo. Are you okay? Unfortunately, Ichigo couldn't hear a word Orihime was saying, his ears ringing from the sudden commotion. Hey, a skin. Yes, responded the stern Ritter, having saved his plate from going flying and holding it up. Do me a favor and text Kisuke. I think I got the joke. Chapter 12. The next day. Karakura town. At a large church near the edge of town, friends, allies, and former enemies began to gather to celebrate the substitute Soul Reaper's marriage to his first wife, Orihime Inoue. The Soul Reapers, led by head captain Kyoraku, began to fill the seats. All of them were in Gigace. Likewise, the party of Arrancars led by Halibel were all in special Gigace, provided to them by Urahara. Of the Quincy's, only Meninus, Candice, Lil Tato, and a skin were present, Giselle begrudgingly obeying Orihime's wish to not come. Of the Foolbringers, only Jackie was seated. Riruka was off in the back with the other bridesmaids and Yukio was too busy with his company to attend a wedding, at least, that's what he told Jackie. In the front row of the church pews sat Ichigo's closest friends. Most of Ichigo's classmates looked giddy as they waited for the ceremony to start. Chizuru didn't know whether to be happy for Orihime or livid at Ichigo, her face constantly changing from crying with joy to red with rage. Near the altar stood most of the bridesmaids. Ruruka, Nell, and Yoruchi were all wearing their best dresses. On the other side stood Yuryu, Kigo, and Chad, the latter acting as Ichigo's best man. Tatsuki was with Orihime getting her ready. Yuryu, dressed in his best suit, saw his father enter the church and take a seat near the back. He was quite surprised to see Ryukin here. The idea that his father would come to see a Soul Reaper's wedding was something the young Quincy didn't think he'd ever see happen. But Yuryu figured that the elder Quincy was here out of respect for Isshin and wanted to see his friend's son get married, although Yuryu seriously doubted he'd be here for other weddings but appreciated the sentiment. An assortment of Soul Reapers lined the seats. Most of the captains and their respective lieutenants had shown up for the ceremony. For the moment, several of them were out in the church's lobby talking. As for the lucky groom, standing in the middle of a small room in the back of the church, Ichigo nervously shifted from one foot to another while looking in a mirror. Dressed in a tuxedo made for him by Kisuke, the groom swallowed the lump in his throat and tried in vain to calm the butterflies in his stomach. Looking sharp. Turning around, Ichigo saw his father walk into the room. "Oh, hi, Dad." Putting a hand on his son's shoulder, Isshin Kurosaki gave the soon-to-be-married teenager a reassuring smile. "Take a breath, Ichigo. It's going to be okay." His father's support helped calm Ichigo, if only for the moment. "Thanks, Dad." Isshin's face softened and a look of pain filled his eyes. "Ichigo, I am really sorry I threw you into the middle of this. I should have sat down and discussed all of this with you rather than throw you to 12 women for the sake of the Soul Society's peace. I just..." Sighing, Isshin hung his head, shame written all over his face. He knew that he, Kyoraku, and Kisuke had been wrong to just throw Ichigo into this without even asking for his input. He chalked it up to all the booze they'd been drinking. "I just thought that you deserved to be happy, and letting so many women who cared for you into your life would do that." A long period of silence filled the small room as father and son looked at each other. Taking a deep breath, Ichigo gave his father an understanding nod. "It's all right, Dad. I'm still mad at you guys for dropping me into this situation without even asking if I was okay with it. But..." Turning away, Ichigo looked over to the door, hearing the sounds of his friends and family outside. He thought about the moments he shared with Orihime, Tatsuki, Candice, Nell, Sung-sun, and Halibel, and how his feelings for them had changed. "I really have come to care for them, and maybe this won't be the disaster I thought it was going to be." Clapping his son on the back, Isshin put his arm around his shoulders. "Don't worry, Ichigo. You'll do fine. You are my son, after all. And don't worry about the ride out of here. I hired a driver to take you two all the way to the seaside cabin you and Orihime are going to be honeymooning in. Kisuke made it himself, and you two will have all the time you need before you have to go marry Yoruchi. Now, come on. I didn't raise you to keep a lady waiting." Ichigo followed his father out of the room, hoping that things didn't become too chaotic when this was all over. Meanwhile, in the church's reception area, several of the lieutenants had gathered and were all talking before they went to go take their seats. And among those lieutenants was Renji. The red-haired Soul Reaper was still fuming but had done a somewhat admirable job in keeping his opinion to himself. Every time he looked inside the church and saw the Quincy's quietly sitting, it made his blood boil. His thoughts turned to Byakuya and the late Yamamoto, and to Toshiro and Ranjaku, who'd suffered fates worse than death at the hands of Giselle. Looking over at Mashiro, Renji tapped her on the shoulder. "Hey, Mashiro. A word?" Ichigo's visored bride nodded, and Renji took her over to a corner of the room, speaking in a hushed tone. "Mashiro, are you sure you're okay with this?" No, I'm not. How could I be okay with this?" pouted the greenette, stomping while wearing her best dress. "Oh, thank God. I thought I was the only one. Listen, we should go talk with the others and I wanted to be Ichigo's first bride." I get that Orihime was his childhood friend and all, but I thought we connected too. Mashiro had been irritable as of late. With Kensei in recovery after getting dezombified, it had fallen on Mashiro to keep Squad 9 in order, leaving her with little time to visit her future husband. She didn't blame Ichigo or the other girls, but she wanted to get her marriage done so she could spend more time with her Ichibari. What? No. I meant the Quincy's. We shouldn't be okay with Ichigo being forced to marry our enemies. Why? It was the head captain's idea, pointed out Mashiro. Yeah, while he was drunk. Look, Mashiro, think about what they did to your captain. To Shuhei, insisted Renji. To his utter dismay, Mashiro shook her head. Look, Renji, everyone here is making peace with what happened. Besides, we did terrible things to the Quincy's too. That's why we were at war in the first place. Renji fought to keep himself from banging his head against the wall. Why is everyone okay with this? A hand came down on his shoulder, making him almost jump out of his suit. The real question is, why do you? Kensei. You came, cheered Mashiro when she saw her captain. Yeah, had to have Mayuri run a few more tests on me before I was given the green light to leave the Siriidii, said the Squad 9 captain. Turning his attention back to Renji, the militant man crossed his arms. Lieutenant Abarai, I get it. You do. Kensei nodded. I don't like the idea of marrying Ichigo to Quincy's either. However, it's not your decision to make. Nor is it the head captain's. At the end of the day, it's Ichigo and the girls who all made the choice to say, I do. So do us all a favor. Calm down and keep the attitude in check. Seeing that this was an argument he was never going to win, Renji would have to concede the argument. For now. Okay. Turning away from the Squad 9 captain and lieutenant, Renji left the room to go take a seat next to his captain. Ichigo stood at the altar, feeling everyone's eyes on him. Beside him were his father, Chad, Yuryu, and Kigo acting as the groomsmen. Once everyone had taken their seats, the door to the church opened. The moment he laid eyes on his bride, every doubt and worry in his mind faded. The only thing he could focus on was the most appealing woman he'd ever seen. Yuryu had gone above and beyond for Orihime's wedding dress. To everyone, especially Ichigo, she looked like an angel descending from on high. Her dress was a traditional ball gown that went up to her shoulders. Yuryu had crafted the chest into a plunging corset, leading down to a skirt that went all the way to her high heels. All of it was made in romantic chantilly lace that made her shimmer and sparkle in the sunlight. The veil that covered her face couldn't hide the happy smile as she walked down the aisle while holding a bouquet of white roses. Beside her stood Kisuke, leading the girl towards her husband-to-be. The shopkeeper offered to give her away to Ichigo since Orihime had no family. Tatsuki, coming up from behind, quickly took her place among the bridesmaids. To everyone's amusement, Tessai was the one manning the church's pipe organ playing, Here Comes the Bride. Once they reached the altar, Kisuke let Orihime stand beside Ichigo before taking his seat next to Kyoraku. The preacher took the stage and began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. While the holy man spoke, the two orange-haired teens looked at each other. You are appealing, Ichigo whispered, taking hold of her hands. Orihime smiled back, unable to contain the joy in her eyes. Everything in their minds seemed to vanish. The other brides, the captains, and their friends and family. For just a moment, all there was in the world were one boy and one girl. Their attention was brought back into focus by the preacher. Ichigo Kurosaki. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To love for as long as you live, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Giving her hand a gentle squeeze, Ichigo nodded. I do, he said confidently. And do you, Orihime Inoue, take this man to be your husband? Tears of joy threatening to spill down her face, the orangette nodded. I do. Together, the two teens produced rings and slipped them on each other's ring finger. Ichigo's wedding ring was a simple golden band with Orihime's name engraved on it. Orihime's was a diamond twist wedding band made out of white gold, specifically crafted by Kyoraku. Nodding in satisfaction, the preacher shut his Bible. "Then I now pronounce you man and wife. Ichigo, you may kiss your bride." Lifting her veil, Ichigo reached out and wiped the tears from the edges of her eyes. Everyone watched with happy faces as the substitute Soul Reaper leaned in for a kiss, cementing his marriage to the girl. Happier than she'd ever been in her life, Orihime threw her arms around her husband's neck while giving him another, deeper one. The crowd cheered and applauded while Yuzu, Rukia, and Chizuru were all in tears, although Chizuru's was more from jealous anger. Turning back to the crowd, Orihime held up the bouquet of roses and tossed it into the crowd. To everyone's amusement, they saw it land in Kenpachi's hand. Offering his wife his arm, Ichigo led her down the aisle to the doors of the church. Upon walking outside, the newly married couple found a limo waiting for them. That must be what Dad was talking about. Holding the door open, Ichigo let Orihime climb inside before joining her in the limo. From behind the pane of glass in the front of the limo came a voice that sounded familiar to Ichigo. "One trip to your honeymoon, coming right up. You're lucky I don't drag you back to work instead, Ichigo." Ichigo blinked in confusion. What? The panel of glass lowered, letting him see who his father hired to take them to their honeymoon. Ikumi. Grinning from ear to ear, the worker tipped her hat to the married couple. "You've got a lot of explaining to do when you get back. First you shirk off your work again, and now I get told you're getting married." Ikumi laughed before putting the limo in drive. Young people. The married orange heads looked at each other awkwardly as the limo began to move away from the church. Both of them had the exact same thought. Let's hope she doesn't have to drive for the other weddings, otherwise she's going to get pretty confused. Hours later. The seaside cabin was the epitome of cozy. Once Ikumi had dropped them off, Ichigo picked up his wife and carried her into their honeymoon home. Inside they found not only two large wardrobes for them to change out of their wedding attire, but a small cake for them to share together. Ichigo had asked about the reception but Kyoraku, Isshin, and head captain had all agreed that they would have won once all the girls were married. Ichigo could understand since paying for 12 receptions would have been incredibly costly. Ichigo stepped out onto the cabin's patio, letting the sea breeze wash over him. The groom wore only an opened white shirt, black shorts, and sandals. Spotting his wife standing on the white sands a short distance away, Ichigo once again felt like he was in the presence of an angel. The cool wind blew around Orihime, her long orange hair flowing in the wind. The newly wedded girl had taken off her wedding dress and instead wore a white, transparent, open shirt and a matching two-piece bikini underneath it. Watching the waves wash in and out of shore, Orihime reached for her hand and touched her wedding ring, feeling joy in its presence. Her husband's arms wrapped around her and pulled her into his embrace. Leaning back into his chest, Orihime laid her head on Ichigo's shoulder, the two enjoying each other's warmth. "You're so appealing," he whispered, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Flatterer," chuckled the bride, turning around in his arms and planting a soft kiss on his lips. "I can't believe it. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that." Halibel had never said anything about her time in captivity, but the look on her face when she thought nobody was looking told Sung-sun volumes. Sitting down on a flat piece of rubble, Bambietta shrugged. "Well, there's still plenty of ice around. Sangdu's room is that way." Bambietta pointed in the direction of the hallway. "Pretty sure he's got a pair of skates somewhere. Though I doubt they'd fit someone who wears clodhoppers like those." Ignoring the obvious jab, Mashiro hurried down the hallway towards the fallen Stern Ritter's room to try to find her prize. Sung-sun eyed Bambietta suspiciously before following Mashiro, leaving Ichigo alone with his Quincy bride. Sitting on the rock next to her, Ichigo sat in uncomfortable silence as they waited for the two girls to return. Bambietta? What? I've been meaning to ask, what's with the whole praying mantis behavior that Candice mentioned earlier? Sighing, Bambietta turned away, showing her back to Ichigo. Ichigo, you honestly could never comprehend someone like me. So don't bother. I ain't candy. I am what I am. And that is. Silence filled the empty ruins. For a few minutes, Bambietta refused to answer. Turning back to her future husband, Bambietta stared at his honest face and felt something within her crack. Someone who can't stand being inferior to anyone. As far as I was concerned, anyone and everyone was just something for me to use and then dispose of. Men especially. So many of those dumb soldat men looked at me like some schoolgirl to bend over on prom night. I took every chance I got to tempt them into thinking they'd actually get to be with me. And yet despite my reputation, there wasn't a single one who entered my bedroom who wasn't happy. If you're asking me if I feel guilty for what I did, the answer is a hard no, Ichigo. I don't weep for the foolish, I'd be crying all day otherwise. I see. Ichigo looked down at the ground for a moment while letting his thoughts settle. So then, do you feel inferior to me? Bambietta didn't answer at first. Resting her head on her hands, the stern Ritter joined him in staring awkwardly at the ground. Kinda. How could I not? There isn't anyone alive who is superior to you. I mean, yeah, you lost to Halibel, but that was more because you refused to fight seriously. So of course I feel inferior to you. But you don't look at me like most of the Vandenrake did, she confessed. You look at me like I'm a person, not a monster with just a pair of legs to spread. Bambietta pointed in the direction where Mashiro had gone. I assume that's why you've got her as a wife. Because she totally gives off the vibe of being an absolute freak. Scratching the back of his head, Ichigo looked down the hallway awkwardly. I didn't exactly choose anyone to marry me. When Kyoraku made the pitch, Mashiro made the offer along with Ranjiku and Yoruchi. Humph. At least she had the option of choosing to marry you. You know what I was doing when Candy and Many signed me away? Stinking up the place with my corpse. You don't have to get married, Bambi. I wouldn't force it on you any more than I would force this on Sung-sun or Mashiro, insisted Ichigo. Bambietta let the idea of backing out of the marriage roll around in her head for a while. True, she had her life back and she owed Candice and the others nothing, they only had Kisuke bring her back to life so that Ichigo didn't marry a zombie. She could walk away and live out her life on her terms. And yet, looking at Ichigo and seeing perhaps the first man in her life to treat her like a decent human being, Bambietta would be lying if she said she wasn't charmed by him, at least a little. No. I want to see where this goes, she confessed, scooting closer to her future husband. I don't know where I'd go even if I left. Looking out at the ruins of Silburn, for the first time Bambietta felt the weight of the Vandenrake's defeat sink in. I've got nothing left, Ichigo. Hell, what am I even supposed to do now that the other stern Ritters and Yawach are gone? I came back to life and have literally been left with nothing. Ichigo put a hand on her shoulder to comfort her, not knowing what exactly to say to console her. To his surprise, aid came from the last person he expected. Hey! Cheer up! Jumping over the sitting girl, Mashiro landed in front of her and gave her a happy smile. Me, Shinji, and the rest of the Vizards know exactly how you feel. Huh? What are you talking about? Bending forward so that she and Bambietta were looking eye to eye, the cheerful lieutenant continued to smile at her fellow bride. Over 100 years ago, I lost everything because of Sosuke Eisen. My home, my friends, my sister, and my role as a lieutenant. All of it was gone in one night. Eisen used us as a sick experiment for his holification. We survived because of Kisuke, but when we came to, we found that we had to go on the run with nothing but the clothes on our backs for decades. Ichigo listened to the greenette intently. In all the time that he knew Mashiro, he'd never heard her speak so seriously. Her expression was uncharacteristically sad, showing that she was being heartfelt with the stern Ritter. Bambietta could likewise tell Mashiro was actually being serious and continued listening. How'd you cope? Well, it wasn't easy. I cried myself to sleep for months as we went from place to place, never staying too long in one spot out of fear that the Soul Society, or worse Eisen, would find us. But we pulled through because we had each other to lean on. Mashiro's smile returned to her face. Just like you have Ichigo to lean on now. Sure, we may have been enemies, but that doesn't mean we can't help each other when we're down. The sincerity in Mashiro's eyes threatened to make Bambietta tear up. She remembered the way her so-called friends interacted with her, none of them ever showed her this much kindness. Thanks, Mashiro. An elbow nudged her unoccupied side. She's right. Lady Halibel, Nelio, and I know what it's like to be left with nothing and have to start over from scratch. So you don't need to be afraid of what to do. Bambietta gave the Arrancar a rare smile. Thanks, she said softly. The moody atmosphere came to an end when Mashiro clapped her hands. Okay. So then, who's up for skating? We found a bunch of ice skates in that room. Ichigo and Bambietta looked at each other before looking over at Sung-sun, who gave them an encouraging smile. That'd be great, Mashiro. Standing up, the three followed Mashiro down the hallway to find the skates, the Greenette lieutenant eager to get her vacation started. To be continued. Oh, make the collection. Back at the mansion, Liltato was busy bringing in some fresh groceries for the kitchen when she heard strange noises coming from the parlor. Curious, she set down her bag and left the kitchen, sticking her head into the parlor entryway. A skin? What are you doing? And why are you wearing that white shihakusho? Oh, hello, Liltato. A skin had converted the parlor into his own photo studio, standing in front of a white backdrop. Just working on Bambi's wedding present. By dressing as Sosuke Eisen. Dressed in one of the villain's old outfits, a skin merely nodded. Well, you know how Bambi always said I looked like Eisen. Well, I decided to go along with the joke and pose for a photo album called the Eisen Collection. I call this one Eisen, but Quincy. Turning back to the camera, he gave an angry expression before hitting the SWCH in his hand to activate the camera, the light flashing brightly for a moment as it took his picture. I call that one Angry Soul Reaper Eisen. And I think I'll do a skin as Eisen, but serious, but not as serious as Eisen. Perfect, don't you think? Liltato slowly backed away from the man, turning around and heading back to the kitchen. Candice entered through the side door. What is that Fruit Loop doing now? She demanded, seeing more flashes go off in the parlor. Something that Bambi is either going to laugh at or be annoyed by. Either way, I do not want any part in it and neither should you. Candice's curiosity got the better of her and she left the kitchen to poke her head into the parlor. She came back seconds later with a disturbed expression. Okay, next round table we have, I'm introducing a new rule for the house, a skin is not allowed to dress up. That's too creepy. Agreed. Chapter 14. The next morning. Squad 1, Head Captain's office. A knock at the door interrupted the conversation inside Kyoraku's new office. The head captain looked up and nodded at his second lieutenant, Okikiba. The older of his two lieutenants walked over to the door and opened it. Kyoraku's eye narrowed when he saw his visitor. Lieutenant Kuchiki. What can I do for you this morning? I would have thought you'd be preparing for Ichigo's wedding to Lady Yoruchi. The raven-haired girl nervously stepped into the office, surprised to see her older brother, Byakuya, standing near the desk. She realized she'd interrupted a conversation between them and knew that this was a bad idea. But despite her reservations, she stepped forward. In a bit, head captain. But it's actually because of Ichigo that I'm here. She hesitated for a moment, glancing over to her brother before continuing. Renji and I have been discussing this situation and I've come to protest. Folding his hands together, Kyoraku leaned forward. Rukia had feared that her commanding officer would be upset that she would raise an objection, but if anything, his expression told her that he expected it. Oh. It's a little late for that, Lieutenant Kuchiki. We've already got the ball rolling and Ichigo has made it clear that he's willing to commit to his brides. I'm aware, head captain. The lieutenant paused to try to scramble for words to make a suitable argument. I was as happy as everyone else when he and Orihime married. But, well, we're asking too much of him. Having him marry women who were his enemies, it's insane. I admit, when I sent out the invitations, I was caught off guard when the Foolbringer, the Queen of Hueco Mundo, and 3 stern ridders, 2 of whom tried to kill him during the war, would all offer their hands in marriage. But this is not a forced marriage. Everyone sat down and decided to move forward with the proposal. Ichigo may have been hesitant. This time it was Kyoraku's turn to pause as he remembered Ichigo's reaction shortly after being told the news. After being told, but he seems willing to give this a try. Yes, but 12 brides? Rukia stepped closer, her eyes constantly flitting over to her brother. 2 is pushing the bounds of credibility, but, it's not. Exactly like he can file for divorce if this whole thing falls flat, she pointed out. We'll cross that bridge if it comes to it. But tell us something, Lieutenant, and you're free to speak your mind without repercussion. Is this coming from you? Or from Lieutenant Abarai? Kyoraku asked, but he, his 2 lieutenants, and Byakuya already knew the answer. Rukia didn't even try to hide the truth. She slumped and let out a sigh. Renji. So he sent you here to try to convince me to end this rather than come here himself? Kyoraku's eye narrowed and his expression soured. He felt. Rukia took another sigh before standing up straight and dropping the act. He's been acting like such a child lately that he knew better than to come here in person to complain. For the first time, Byakuya spoke. Rukia, you are in the presence of your commanding officer. Speak with more respect, he chided. Kyoraku held up a hand to stop Byakuya. No. I told her she could speak freely, and I will allow her the courtesy. I'm well aware of Renji's feelings. I heard about that little incident between him and Ichigo when he was asked to be Ichigo's best man. Captain Muguroma told me that he even tried to get his lieutenant to side with him on the issue. Sitting back in his chair, Kyoraku took off his straw hat and set it down on the desk. I won't invalidate Renji's feelings. He's right to be angry. The Quincy's smashed the Siriidii up good, and there's a lot of good people who should be here right now, but aren't because of them. His hands rubbed the arms of his chair, sadly remembering its last occupant. And the Arankars sided with a man who betrayed us so he could play at godhood. So for his young friend to have to marry not 1 but 6 of them, plus a foolbringer who betrayed him, it's a tough ask of anyone. I'm certain that if I were in his shoes, I'd be plenty upset. A long silence filled the brief pause before Kyoraku looked back up. But you, me, Nanao, and Byakuya all know that sadly Renji is not exactly the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree. No disrespect to your lieutenant, Captain Kuchiki, he quickly added, glancing over to Byakuya. None taken, head captain. Byakuya turned his eyes back to Rukia. Renji is very capable, but his biggest weakness is his failure to think before he acts. Correct. We'll handle the situation with him another time. We've a wedding to get through today, after all. But while we're on the subject of weddings, I must admit I was a little surprised when you didn't offer your hand in marriage. Forgive me if I'm the one who's speaking out of turn, but I always thought there was something between you two. Jushiro and I kinda thought there was romance involved. Head captain. This time it was Nanao's turn to interject, stepping forward to her captain's side. Don't put words into her mouth. I'm not. But you can see where I'm coming from. How many people break into the afterlife and brave unknown odds? You can see how me and Jushiro might jump to some conclusions. When you learned that Orihime would be marrying him and not you, part of me was afraid you would be jealous. I wasn't upset at all, head captain. Orihime is like a sister to me. I was happy to see her get married. But Renji. Kyoraku's eyebrow rose with curiosity. Could it be that Renji is jealous of Ichigo? The question settled on everyone's minds. Nanao pushed her glasses up and frowned. Head captain, I must remind you that Lady Yoruichi's wedding to Ichigo Kurosaki will begin shortly. As the one behind this polygamous marriage, it would not be acceptable if you were late, no matter how fashionably. A good point. We'll discuss this matter about Renji later. I suspect I'll have to have a sit-down with the man myself. You're dismissed, Lieutenant Kuchiki. Rukia bowed and promptly left the office, Kyoraku's words weighing heavily on her mind. After the girl left and the door closed, Nanao scowled at her captain. Head captain, that was incredibly inappropriate. Are you trying to drive a wedge between Lieutenant Abarai and Kuchiki? I agree with Lieutenant Ise. Byakuya's icy glare became focused intently on his superior. While Kyoraku may outrank him, he wasn't going to be silent and it came to matters about Rukia. Not again. Byakuya knew Kyoraku long enough to know he was a crafty man and didn't want his sister dragged into this mess. I have held my tongue on the matter regarding Ichigo's polygamous marriage, but if you've designs for Rukia, there will be consequences. I assure you both, nothing of the sort even crossed my mind. Putting his straw hat back on, Kyoraku stood up out of his chair. Anyway, we've a wedding to get to. Grabbing his pink kimono, he slipped it on. But before you start imagining things again, let me ask you this, Byakuya, is your sister happy? The younger man had no real answer. By all accounts, the answer should be an obvious yes. His sister was now not only a respected Soul Reaper but was a respected acting captain of her squad. She'd grown from the timid girl that Byakuya had found and had even earned his acknowledgement. And yet. I don't know, he finally said. Kyoraku said nothing, merely gesturing for his lieutenants to follow him as they headed to the Shihoin clan. Byakuya shortly followed him out, wondering what they were going to do about Renji. Meanwhile. Shihoin clan. While the guests began to arrive for the wedding, the groom was busy getting ready in a back room, dressed in a magnificent black robe with the Shiba clan's emblem on the back. Sheesh, and I thought Byakuya's robe was bulky. How can anyone wear this stuff? After arriving at the manor in the morning, Ichigo had been whisked away by the servants to get ready, Yoruichi going up to her room to get ready too. After fitting him in a robe provided by Kakaku and Ganju, the servants informed Ichigo to wait in the room until everything was ready. Ichigo had assumed after going through his first wedding with Orihime that he wouldn't have butterflies in his stomach anymore. But if anything, the waiting only made it worse. Plus, judging from the looks Ranjaku and Mashiro gave him when he arrived, he had a feeling Yoruichi had something planned for their wedding night and it wasn't going to be gentle. Pacing back and forth, he kept looking at the clock. His thoughts were interrupted, however, when he heard a voice behind him. It was a voice Ichigo thought he'd never hear again. Why so nervous, Nino? A wedding should be the happiest day of your life. Spinning around, Ichigo's eyes widened and his jaw dropped when he saw a familiar face staring back at him, standing in the doorway. Dordoni. Laughing jovially, the Privaran Espada stepped into the room. Long time, no see, Nino. But I guess I can't call you that anymore. Goodness, Ichigo. Is it true that you're marrying 12 different women? His laughter grew when Ichigo awkwardly nodded. 12 women. Did you hear me call you Nino and go, hold my tequila? Ichigo stood there in a state of shock. He remembered the last time he saw Dordoni and could feel his spiritual pressure fade as he was killed. But, how are you here? Anne. His eyes finally noticed the myriad of stitches all along the Arrancar's face and hands. What's with the stitches? You look like. The words died in his mouth as he recalled what they reminded him of, or rather who they reminded him of, Candice and Meninus. You were brought back by Mayuri. You catch on quick, Ichigo. I'm glad you were able to escape before that squad of morons executed you. I gave my life to keep them from pursuing you, Dordoni said with a solemn look on his face, although he seemed more than happy that his sacrifice paid off. Afterwards, my body was taken by Sailaporo and then appropriated again by that wacko scientist of yours who brought me back as part of his corpse unit. I see. Ichigo gave Dordoni a smile. I never got to thank you for what you did for me. Think nothing of it, Ichigo. You were willing to expend energy you were saving for tougher fights on me just to soothe my pride. Dordoni put his hands on Ichigo's shoulders. But enough about the past. Today is a special day. I must say, Ichigo, I recognize your bride from the fight with that snake, Tokunada. You've certainly got your hands full with her as your wife. Dordoni didn't get to finish his sentence. A burst of electricity erupted from the Arrancar, making him yelp in pain. Ichigo jumped backward in alarm, thinking they were under attack. He quickly scrambled to where his Zangetsu blades were resting against the wall and readied himself for an attack. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Ichigo Kurosaki. It's just a little electric shock to get him to stop talking. Into the room stepped Mayuri Kuratsuchi, dressed in the golden headdress he wore before the second invasion along with his usual shihakusho and haori. The only sign that he was willing to dress formally was the small bow tie he had on that was barely noticeable. In his hands was a small device, his thumb on the button on top. When he took his thumb off of it, the electric bursts faded and Dordoni stopped rolling on the floor in pain. Mayuri, you. Ichigo clenched his teeth, hands balling in anger. He held a lot of respect for Dordoni after their battle, and to see him be so brutally disrespected rankled him to the core. How dare you do that to Dordoni? Oh please, Ichigo Kurosaki. Save that sort of energy for your wedding night, Mayuri said dismissively. You don't seem to understand the situation, but I'm willing to overlook your lack of foresight since having 12 different relationships can take its toll on one's ability to think, he said offhandedly before continuing. Do not forget that it was because of my benevolence that your friend here came back to life in the first place. When the fool found out about your engagements, he continued to pester me for a chance to speak with you. I was gracious enough to allow him 2 minutes of free time, but now he's testing the limits of my patience. Mayuri nudged Dordoni with the tip of his foot. Get up, you. RGH. The revived Arrancar picked himself up off the floor. Sometimes I wonder if I was better off in Sailaporo's vault. Dusting himself off, Dordoni turned back to Ichigo. Well, Ichigo. I'll be seeing you. Hopefully this payaso will give me some free time to say hello to you and Lady Nellio. I still owe my successor an apology, after all. Dordoni bowed and turned to leave the room. Mayuri shuffled to the side to let him through. Seeing the look on Ichigo's face, the scientist scowled. I wouldn't think of demanding his release, Ichigo Kurosaki. I was courteous enough to relinquish the 2 stern ridders thanks to the deal our scheming new head captain brokered with the Quincy's, but I assure you, my Arrancars are not up for negotiation, he warned. And besides, you have more pressing concerns to worry about. Yoruchi Shihoin does not like to be kept waiting. With that, the captain turned around and left the room, leaving Ichigo where he stood. Taking a deep breath, Ichigo put his swords back against the wall. A female servant entered the room and bowed. Lord Ichigo. It's time. Nodding, Ichigo followed the servant out of the room, the butterflies returning to him as he headed for the wedding. An hour later. The Shihoin clan had decided to hold the wedding in the gardens, appealing roses adorning the decorations and structures. All of the captains were once again present, dressed in uniform alongside many of the nobility. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. 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 Staring at the collection of humans, Arancars, and Quincy's, Renji gritted his teeth before he focused his attention on Ichigo. He walked over to the young man and crossed his arms. We need to talk. Walking around the table, Ichigo stood in front of his old friend and stared intently at him. Go ahead. I'm angry, Ichigo. I know I've been a jackass lately. Renji's gaze dropped for a brief moment, giving Rukia and Ichigo hope that maybe he'd done some self-reflection. However, he looked back up and continued his tirade. So I want you to know exactly why I'm so angry and why I want you to stop this nonsense. Go on. I am so sick of you getting all the credit. First Eisen, then the Vandenrake. Me, Rukia, and everyone else fought just the same, yet you're the only one who's lauded with praise. You're the one who gets the accolades. What about guys like me and Shuhei? Huh? Where's Shuhei's recognition after he stopped Tokunada? Bambietta's eyes lit up with fury. Excuse me. She stepped forward, but a skin put a hand on her shoulder to stop her. Renji's eyes turned to Rukia, and she could feel the hurt inside of him as he stared at her before he looked back at Ichigo. Rukia always said it was you who saved her life. Even though I tried with all my might to stop the execution. I got cut down by my own captain, then almost killed again by Eisen, the one man I thought I could trust. But I thought afterward that I made a friend that I could count on. He glanced over at the Quincy's behind him. But you turned your back on every Soul Reaper when you decided to ally with the Quincy, after all they've done to us. Am I jealous? Yes. At first, I was jealous. But now. He stepped closer until Ichigo could feel his breath hit his face. I hate you. Do you have any idea, how it feels after dedicating my whole life to something, only to have some punk kid show up and outclass me in every way and take the love of my life away from me and be rewarded every step of the way? Rukia's face turned red hot. She could feel everyone's eyes turn towards her, and she couldn't do anything but stare at the floor. But now I've had it. Renji's lips formed a challenging smile. But I realize just one thing I can get you as a wedding present, a challenge. You. Me. Right now. To be continued. Oh, make fit for a king. While Ichigo was still in Hueco Mundo. Guys? What is this? Asked Ichigo as he stood in the throne room. After letting Nell ease his nerves, they returned to the throne room of Las Noches before they headed back home. When they returned, they noticed a new addition. Sitting next to Halibel's throne was a second white seat. What? You are going to be my husband, after all. That makes you the king of Hueco Mundo. And what kind of king would you be without a throne? I guess, Ichigo scratched the back of his head. The idea of him, of all people, ruling as a king seemed really silly. But where'd you get the throne? Did Apache or Mila Rose make it? No, actually. When I took over Las Noches, I removed Eisen's throne in exchange for one of my own. Halibel sat down in her throne and gestured to Ichigo's. It's only fitting, isn't it? You defeated Eisen, so you deserve his throne. It felt oddly strange for Ichigo to sit in Eisen's throne. But he could tell that Halibel was very serious about it and decided to oblige her. He took a seat on the throne, reclining back in it. Well? What do you think? Shifting for a moment, Ichigo couldn't help but let his discomfort be known. I think Eisen must not have had much of an but after sitting on this thing. It's hard as hell. Meanwhile. Muken. Deep in the depths of the underground prison, Sosuke Eisen was back on his cross, albeit with his face uncovered. In the darkness of Muken, his sneeze was barely heard. Eisen thought about it for a moment. He was immortal, so he couldn't possibly catch a cold down here. That meant that someone somewhere was talking about him. And he had a good idea who. Ichigo better not be sitting in my chair.